Hey everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and away we go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just it's a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We're having yet another one of our great late night conversations here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, which is even more lovely than the one that I started saying that with, right? We've been here. This is stream number 735. Can you believe that? 735 times our community has come together. When these streams started, there was 5 people watching. Now there's hardly a stream that goes by when there's not at least 200. Sometimes it has gotten over 800, 900 people watching. It's amazing. We have done amazing things. Our community is marching ahead because we have a message that so many people want to hear. And I'm really, really proud to be part of our community. And really, we are the American representation of a global movement of people that want humanity to go forward and expand. That is what we are. We are the American wing of the city building tendency. We are the Kerch Bridge. We are the Chinese space program. We are the Three Gorges Dam. We are the high-speed railways of China that we put on the cover of Do You Believe in Growth? We are the Bolivarian communes that provide health care. We are the Venezuelan housing blitz. We are North Korea's satellites they launch into orbit. You know, we are so many great things. We are amazing. And being part of our movement means you are part of the future. And you are refusing to accept the world as it is, of poverty and war and suffering. And so I'm really proud of all of you that are here. Salute to all of you. Salute to the great members of our community. So great to be here with all of you tonight. So anyhow, for those of you that are maybe new tonight, the way we do things here is I give my opening remarks, and my opening remarks include me just talking about what I'm talking about. But as the opening remarks are happening, boom, the super chats are coming in here on YouTube, and the Rumble rants are coming in on the Rumble. And then from there, we do the roll call, where I call you all out as I see you, and we find out who's on the other side of the camera, who's in our audience. It's always a very diverse and interesting audience that we have here from all across the planet. That's really, really great. And then I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. And that's the best part of the show, because when you guys ask me questions that get me talking, when you guys ask me questions that just get me talking, it's amazing, because I just start answering things off the cuff. It becomes very, very informal and chatty, and we joke with each other, and it's awesome. It is tremendous when we do that. So yeah, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Now, a couple announcements, big announcements, and I hope StreamYard is cooperating. It has not been working well lately. I would love to put this poster on the screen. Will it let me? Will it let me? Is it going to put on the screen? No, it's not going to let me put the poster on the screen, which is infuriating. I don't know why. Browser can't access your screen. Try capturing a different screen to see if it continues. What does that mean? I do not understand why it's being annoying. I would like to put the poster on the screen because it's a beautiful poster. I am headed to Los Angeles next week, the city of angels. I am headed to LA. Friday night in Los Angeles, I will be speaking at an event called Removing the Line, North-South Korea Unity Symposium. And I will be speaking alongside Reverend Joshua Holmes of the LA Family Church. And we will be speaking to an audience that will be very multinational, a lot of Japanese Americans, a lot of Korean Americans, a lot of white European Americans, people of different nationalities and different backgrounds. I will be speaking about the North Korean perspective and how we can move toward a peace movement for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. It's going to be a great event, honestly. And I am very, very excited for it. I have not been to LA in a really long time. I have not been to California in a while. I think the last time I was in California was during the rioting at Berkeley after Trump got elected. And that was in the Bay Area. So it's been a really long time since I've been to LA. So I'm very excited. I'm flying out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'll be there. I'll be back in New York City on Monday. So if you're in Los Angeles, come attend. I don't get out there very often. So if you are in Los Angeles, by all means, be there. I will drop the link to the event information in the chat. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. I am really looking forward to it. Joshua is a really good friend of mine. I've got a lot more to say about this upcoming event in this chat because there's a lot that can be said about it. It's already creating a bit of a buzz on social media, and I love that. She's in Thousand Oaks. We'll be there. Come to the event in Monterey Park. It's in Monterey Park. There is the link. There's the link. You can take a look. The event, the address. If you follow that link, it'll take you to the address. Here, I'll drop it in the Rumble as well. It'll take you to the address. It is at LA Family Church. It'll be at 2301 Findlay Avenue in Monterey Park, in Los Angeles. So 2301 Findlay Avenue, Monterey Park, 7 p.m. So if you're in Los Angeles, hope you can make it. I was just on the phone with Dan out in LA. Shout out to Dan. Had a good chat with Dan, a member of our community out in LA. Shout out to you. I know there's other members of our community that are going to be there that I'm in touch with. I'm really excited. So it's going to be interesting, and I'll talk about it later. See, there's Dan, right? I mentioned his name, and there he is. So if you're in LA and you haven't reached out to me yet, shoot me an email, calebmaupin@gmail.com. I'll make sure you get a formal invitation to the event. Let's be in touch. It's going to be a great event. I'm going to talk a little bit about it later in the stream because it's going to be interesting. It's not going to be like events I've spoken at before. It's not going to be like events I've spoken at before, and I'll tell you why later in tonight's broadcast. So we'll just leave it at that for now. But that is the big event that's coming up. So, I am really looking forward to my couple days in California, in sunny California in the summertime. It's already June. It's June 2nd. We're in June already. So it's going to be great. So if you're in the LA area, if you're going to be out there, please, by all means, reach out. Let's have a great event Friday night, and I'll be around. All right. So there's that. Now, the next thing that I wanted to just say is that the Center for Political Innovation is doing great things right now. We are doing amazing, amazing things right now. People are joining the group, and we are about to launch an outreach campaign. We just had our meeting on Saturday. We are about to launch a nationwide outreach campaign about anti-imperialism, about solidarity with the Uhuru movement, about genuine, true patriotism. That is going to be awesome. And I'm very, very excited about that. So if you are serious about stopping World War III and stopping the low-wage police state, building a movement of solidarity here in the United States, demanding a government of action that fights for working families, you should join the Center for Political Innovation. because we are serious. We are not left. We are not right. We are moving forward, and we are advocates of a new America beyond imperialism. And I would love to have you as a member. I would love to put you to work and utilize your skills and talents. We're going to talk a little bit about CPI, obviously, later in the stream tonight. So, join CPI. Always want people to join. We got a lot of exciting activities in the works, and, yeah, it's going to be very great. So, and I see super chats are rolling in. So just a reminder, I answer super chats in the second half of the show. So if you have something for me to talk about in the second half of our program, send a super chat. We got 2 good ones already. One about the Mexican elections, the other about Belarus. I'll be answering both of those in the second half of the show. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. I am going to jump into my opening remarks. We are speeding ahead as a community here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. So glad to be here with all of you. Couldn't be happier to be with you all. Last night, we had a patrons only stream. So I didn't stream last night because it was for patrons only. It was a great stream. I ended up talking. Usually our patrons only streams are just like an hour Q&A. Last night, it was almost 2 hours. People got me talking about all kinds of stuff. College and Vietnam and China and Irish librarians and all kinds of stuff. It was a really sweet conversation last night, and it was really, really great. The Patreon streams we do on the first of the month every month. We also send, patrons also get all of our books and all of that. It's great to be a member of the Patreon community, and we had a great stream last night. We're going to be doing great things. Yeah. So like I said, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and let's jump into my opening remarks for tonight. So I don't know if you saw China. China has landed once again a probe on the far side of the moon. That's great. That's amazing. It's a great, great thing. And I think we should all be very, very proud and happy about it. And the reason that we should be proud and happy about it is not simply because of the fact that I think the space program is a very inspirational thing. I think we should be proud and happy about it because of the fact that that this is not just about space travel. Definitely not just about space travel. This is about fusion energy, because that far side of the moon, that is where you can find a rare earth element called helium-3 that is essential in the development of fusion energy. And you cannot find helium-3 on Earth. You need to go to the moon in order to acquire helium-3. And China is speeding ahead with their project to develop fusion energy. And so they are sending more and more probes to the far side of the moon in order to acquire it. It's really exciting. It's really, really exciting. So I just wanted to let you all know about that. I think it's great. And I want to remind you, who was the first country to go into outer space? Who was the first country to send an object into outer space to orbit the Earth? Soviet Union. Who was the first country to put a person into outer space? Soviet Union. Yuri Gagarin. And now, if you look at the achievements of the space program, it's done great things for humanity. It's technological leaps. And actually, John F. Kennedy, prior to his death, he wanted the moon mission, the mission to reach the moon, to be a joint project between the Soviet Union and the United States. And right before his death, he said that, which is very, very interesting. Many people suspect that John F. Kennedy was killed because of the fact that he thought the best way to defeat communism was to befriend the Soviet Union, negotiate with Khrushchev, have a better relationship with the Soviet Union. And that was a threat to the military-industrial complex that thought the best way to defeat communism was to have big, huge wars. And so, John F. Kennedy, shortly before he was killed, he did say that he wanted the moon mission to be a joint mission between the United States and the Soviet Union, which I think is an amazing, amazing fact that is often left out of history. But I want to just show you, this is CGTN. This is their news story about China's recent lunar landing. So I'm going to put that on, kind of react to the information there. And we'll talk about this. Here we go.
James Head is the professor of geological sciences at Brown University. He's trained astronaut crews in geology and surface exploration and participated in the selection of landing sites for the Apollo moon program. James, thanks very much indeed for joining us. First of all,
my pleasure.
Celebrations in Beijing. Celebrations in Beijing after this successful landing. I mean, it was a tricky operation, wasn't it?
Oh, indeed. It's not trivial to land on the far side. First of all, there's no communications unless you put up a satellite, which the Chinese have very successfully done with Keqiao 1 and 2 satellites. That's enabled them to actually land on the far side. In 2018, with a rover, operating it. So they've already shown that. Now it's sample return from the far side, and the international community is incredibly excited.
The headline mission is collecting rock samples. I mean, and not very many as well, a couple of kilos. Almost certainly undiscovered minerals, but is all of this worth it for a couple of kilos of new material?
Well, it sounds like a small amount, but actually all these fragments, you get fragments of soil thrown from all over the far side of the moon, within the South Pole Aitken Basin, etc. So it's really like a smorgasbord, a treasure chest of different coins and stamps and other kinds of things from different countries, etc. It's really amazing. And so the drill gets the soil with depth, and the scoop gets the soil on the surface so we can study the effects of solar radiation and these kinds of things. So it's actually a really, really representative, comprehensive sample. There are thousands of fragments in there, each one which can be studied and dated individually. It's very exciting and incredibly scientific use.
So what kind of stories can these scientific researchers tell us when we get these samples back?
Well, it's really important to understand that the Earth is so active that all the record of the early history of the Earth has disappeared. It's been destroyed. So the moon preserves that. But we only have half the moon. The moon rotates once on its axis every time it goes around. And so no one has ever seen the far side of the moon from the Earth. Only in the space age when we've been able to put satellites in there. And now China has landed on the far side and is going to bring samples back. And the far side is very different than the near side. It's nobody knows why. And so these samples will help us to understand that. And that may sound arcane, but it really is important because it's our early history. It's also essentially the Rosetta Stone for planetary history, and also the model for how we understand other planetary bodies. So it's an incredible, incredible landing and sample collection treasure chest, and we hope to be able to, in fact, have them return to the Earth.
Now, this is China's mission, obviously, but you've already said, and we recognize there's a huge amount of international interest. What opportunities are there for international collaboration from this project? I mean, will the research be available to all?
Well, already there's a ESA and a French experiment and a Pakistani sub-satellite on the mission, so it's already international, no question about that. And with Chang'e 5, which return robotically samples from the near side, in fact, the Chinese National Space Administration opened that to applications from international investigators recently, and NASA approved U.S. investigators to apply as well. In fact, at our lab at Brown University, we have been selected for further analysis, if you will, by NASA about being able to get the Chang'e 5 samples. So we're very, very happy about that. And China has opened these up to the international community, which I am sure they will do with the Chang'e 6 samples as well.
Well, certainly our congratulations go out to the space exploration community on this one. James, thanks very much indeed for joining us this evening. James Head there.
Thank you. Exciting times.
Now, I want you to see, this is from RT. This is the actual footage from the far side of the moon from China. Here, I will put it on. Here we go. This is what the far side of the moon that we never see looks like. is right. Woe is right. But I really want to get to this because, a recurring theme on these broadcasts, this is what our pamphlet we distributed in bulk at the Libertarian Convention, 1,000 copies were distributed. This is what our pamphlet really gets to, is that human technology and humanity's ability to constantly reinvent our relationship with Mother Nature, to expand our living standards, to expand our life expectancy, to reach a higher plane of technological abundance, to live longer and more comfortable lives, to reinvent our relationship with Mother Nature. That is what defines human beings. No other species can do what human beings have done. And I've said this over and over and over again, but I must repeat myself. Ants have been making their ant farms the same way for thousands of years. And beavers have been making their beaver dams the same way for thousands of years. But in just 7,000 or 8,000 years, human beings have gone from hunter-gatherers living in caves and scavenging the wild for food in tribes to space travel and iPhones and all kinds of amazing things. And that we are constantly reinventing our relationship with nature to be more efficient. And this limited resources bullshit that we're constantly hearing, limited resources, it's malarkey. Not that we shouldn't be conscious of the environment, not that we shouldn't be strategic in how we use our resources, not that we shouldn't be I'm not saying that there's nothing to environmentalism. The Clean Air Act made a huge difference and made life much better in the United States. We all know that in the 70s, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland caught on fire because it was so polluted. So there's obviously environmental concerns, and I'm not poo-pooing that. But when people tell you humanity must stop because there's limited resources on the planet, that's malarkey. Because if we were still burning wood to heat our homes, the planet would have deforested many times over. But as you know, we no longer heat our homes by burning wood. We heat our homes with natural gas, with electricity, and there's a lot more heat that we can get from it, and it's more efficient, and it's a higher fuel source, and as a result, we haven't completely deforested the planet in order to heat our homes, right? And that this, this is one of the myths of the pessimistic society. This idea that human beings, we've gone too far. The planet just can't take us. The planet just can't take us further. Right? That's bullshit. It's just complete and utter bullshit. And that right now, there's legit concerns about fossil fuels. Now, for a long time, they told us that fossil fuels were going to run out by the 1990s. We're going to run out of fossil fuels. And if we were still acquiring oil and natural gas the same way we acquired them in the 1970s, we would have run out. But we discovered deep sea drilling. We discovered hydraulic fracking. We invented new ways to acquire them. And now we have not run out. And yes, they did say that. Go look up peak oil. Peak oil was a huge thing. A lot of very, very smart people were taken in by what they called peak oil. The idea we were going to run out of oil and the international economy was going to collapse. And there was a whole book published by a very important think tank in Italy called The Limits to Growth. And it was all about how we were going to run out of oil by the 1990s. And they were not lying. If we still acquired oil in the same way, we would have. But we didn't. Because we invented new ways of doing it. And there are issues with fossil fuels. Is it possible that fossil fuels are contributing to global warming? Absolutely. However, the solution is not to go backward and reduce consumption. The solution is fusion energy, We need to develop a more efficient fuel source. The way human beings solve ecological crises is by moving forward, not moving backward. You know, the origin of human civilization came when there was a ecological crisis. Humans were so good at hunting and gathering. They developed spears and rocks, and they figured out the patterns of how plants were growing, that there was a scarcity of animals to kill and hunt and eat. And then on top of that, there was a shortage of food and fruits and nuts to gather because we got so good at it. So what did we do? Did we degrow? Did we just say, all right? And did we just degrow? No. We invented agriculture. We started growing our own crops. We started domesticating animals, and we went to a higher mode of production in order to accommodate a greater living standard. And that is the way we solve scarcity, right? We've constantly been reducing scarcity by moving to a higher technological plane. That is the whole history of the human race. And slavery, which came next, that was the first stage, slavery, right? That was one of the first modes of production, was very inefficient, and it was replaced by feudalism. And feudalism was very inefficient. It was replaced by capitalism, and capitalism was a great advance over feudalism. Capitalism brought us electricity. Capitalism brought us steam engines, it brought us automobiles, and capitalism was a great advance. But capitalism at this point is also holding back human technological ability. And the reasons for that are what Marxist economics is all about. You read Capital, you read Theories of Surplus Value, you read the very complex writings that Marx wrote about. He's writing about the fact that never before in history had there been a system where people were hungry because there was too much food. Never before in history had there been a system where people were homeless because there were too many houses. That as the ability of human beings to create wealth expanded and became more efficient, the result was poverty. That didn't make any sense. And what that's rooted in is that your ability to survive under capitalism, you have to be able to rent yourself out to a boss, to an employer. And that boss is trying to churn out as many products as he possibly can, but he wants to hire as few workers as he possibly can. He wants to make them as replaceable as he possibly can. And as a result, pretty soon you have a situation where the worker cannot buy back what he's producing. And the market is full of goods that have been produced, and the worker can't buy them back. And this is called overproduction. And this is the built-in problem of the capitalist system. And this is what the boom-bust cycle is all about. Right? This is called glut. Every economist acknowledges it. G-L-U-T, glut. Right? No other system has ever had this problem. And the U.S. government has invented all kinds of mechanisms to try and deal with it. The military-industrial complex. Our government spends billions of dollars to buy all kinds of tanks and bombs and weapons and drones that they have no intention of ever using. Why? Because that puts money out into the economy, and it keeps the economy going, and it deals with this problem. The U.S. government, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, people don't believe me when I tell them this. I will link you the news article about it, right? Cheese Cave, Springfield, Missouri. You Google the Cheese Cave in Springfield, Missouri. You know, you can read all about it. Missouri's Cheese Cave that stores more than 7 million pounds of dairy. There is a cave in Missouri where the U.S. government has bought over 7 million pounds of cheese, and it buries it. And it just buries it in this cave. Why? That's to keep the price of dairy high, to deal with this problem of overproduction, right? This is irrational. It's completely irrational. And people look at this problem, it's always there in capitalism, right? Whenever you have capitalism, you have more goods produced than you have wages being paid out for people to buy them. But when you have a huge technological leap, you then have a long-term economic crisis. World War I came as the result of big economic crises that broke out because of the fact that there had been huge technological leaps. And World War II came as a result of the fact that first, after World War I, after mass death, 20 million people died in World War I, there was an economic boom. And during that economic boom, a man named Henry Ford developed very, very efficient ways of running assembly lines in factories. And you know about the Roaring 20s. During the Roaring 20s, all of a sudden, America was producing more cars than ever before, and radios, and factory production was very, very efficient. And it wasn't just Henry Ford. There was another guy named Taylor. It was called, they called it Taylorism. It was this ultra efficiency on the assembly line. Produce as many products as you possibly can. And there was an economic boom. And they actually had a slogan that they put everywhere in the United States and in Britain and in France and in Western Europe. They said, Ford has overtaken Marx. They said that Henry Ford had developed a form of capitalism that was so efficient that Marx and his critique of capitalism has been completely discredited. Ford has overtaken Marx. That was the slogan that they used, because they said that they had created this super efficient form of techno-capitalism, and Henry Ford was paying his workers higher wages and all this stuff. But then the Great Depression hit. The stock market crashed, and they had an economic crisis, 1929, 1930, that wouldn't get better. And they were used to having depressions for 1 or 2 years, but they had never had an economic crisis that was as long as the Great Depression of the 1930s, because there had never been so much of a technological leap before. And the market couldn't recover from what Henry Ford and what Taylor and American efficiency, that's what they used to call it, American efficiency, had done. It had created the largest glut in history. Never had there been so much of a glut, and people were starving to death on the streets of America, and people were fleeing the Midwestern states, losing their farms and fleeing en masse, and it was a disaster. And Germany was already in the shithole, and there was possibly going to be a communist revolution. So Hitler took power, and there was all kinds of instability and unrest. And out of that unrest came the Second World War. And the Second World War completely destroyed every major city in the Western world, except in the United States. But all of Japan, which was an industrialized country, destroyed. All of France and Britain and Germany and Italy destroyed. All of the Western world, except for the United States, turned into a battlefield. And because of that, there was so much destruction and so much death. Millions killed in China. Millions died in Hitler's concentration camps at the gas chambers. Millions of people in Russia, 27 million people died in World War II. And then coming out of World War II, you had a great advance in technology coming out of World War II. And you also had, at the same time, you had suddenly a post-World War II economic expansion. And it was during World War II that the computer revolution got going. In World War II, you had the decoder machine, right? You know about the famous decoder machine, Alan Turing's decoder machine. It was the first computer that was developed. And it wasn't developed by the free market. It was developed by the government, right? Alan Turing, who was a math professor, was basically drafted by the British government. They barely paid him any money. And he developed a very, very efficient decoding machine that laid the basis for the modern computer revolution. And that computer revolution continued. And we know later that it was a decision by the intelligence agencies that created the computer revolution. And the market wasn't going to do it. And the Soviet Union developed computers in their state-run tech sector. And they even developed, by 1982, they had their own home computer that they had developed. And the Soviet Union was developing computers, but the United States had more money, being at the center of the world economy, being already industrialized. And they realized that being at the center of the computer revolution was a way they could beat the Soviet Union. They said that we may not be able to, defeat the Soviet Union militarily, but we will control information. And with our control of information, we can harness the disruption of traditional social relations that's going on to overthrow the Soviet Union. And actually, there's a book on this by none other than geostrategist Zbigniew Brzezinski, the Cold War strategist. Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote a book called The Technotronic Age. It's called what is it called? America Enters the Technotronic Age, right? And if you look at this book by Brzezinski, it is all about how he basically argues that the hippies and the counterculture and all of that stuff is not a communist revolution. It is a change in the culture rooted in the fact that people have access to information in ways they didn't used to have. People can watch TV, people can get more information, so they're questioning things. People aren't as religious as they used to be. The traditional family is not as solid as it used to be. People don't believe what the government says in the same way that they used to, and that there's a renegotiation of the way people relate to each other because there's more information out there. People are more open-minded than they used to be. People are less willing to believe what the government says because they have access to information. And Brzezinski, in that book, he argues that the way the United States can win the Cold War is that the United States needs to just sit at the center of this technotronic era, this arriving technotronic era, and it can use the upheavals that'll result from new access to information. It can use that to destabilize the Soviet Union and eventually overthrow it. And so it was with Brzezinski's geostrategic thinking that the American government set up Silicon Valley. And that is a fact, mind you, right? And that sounds conspiratorial, but you can look it up. Look up IBM and the CIA. Look up Amazon and the Pentagon. Look up the NSA and the National Security Agency and the CIA and the Pentagon and their role in Silicon Valley. You will see that all the big tech companies, IBM, Apple, Microsoft, all of them came into existence because of the U.S. government, not the free market. Did you hear that? Not the free market. Nothing pisses me off than hearing libertarians be like, oh, how can you be a socialist? You've got an iPhone. You can't be a socialist. Oh, you've got an iPhone. Where was the first mobile phone patented? 1957 in the Soviet Union by Leonid Kaprianovich. Soviet Union invented mobile phones. And the satellites for the GPS in your phone. What was the first country to launch a satellite into space? That would be Sputnik, the Soviet Union. So, I don't know where these libertarians are getting this. Oh, you can't have an iPhone. Capitalism made your iPhone. Actually, no. Mobile phones were invented by the Soviet Union. Satellites were invented by the Soviet Union. LED lights were invented by the Soviet Union. AK-47 rifles were invented by the Soviet Union. A country that was surrounded, that was just rising up and industrializing with a socialist planned economy, invented a lot of things. And nowadays, the best iPhones, the best smartphones are made in a state-controlled mega corporation in China called Huawei Technologies, right? Which is a state-controlled cooperative set up by the Chinese military. So the idea that only capitalism, only the free market can make your iPhone is just such a ridiculous thing to say. No one should be able to say that with a straight face, right? And the fact that Jacobin magazine wrote an article trying to refute this and never mentioned any of what I just said. I don't know how they did that, but they wrote an article about the iPhone thing and never mentioned anything about what I just said. They just mentioned U.S. government and university subsidies of computer research. I don't know how they can do that because it's just right in your face that the Soviet system and state-controlled Chinese corporations, they did all kinds of inventions. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Regardless, during the Cold War, the 50s and 60s, but really escalating in the late 70s, as Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger got the upper hand after the USA got defeated in Vietnam, the Trilateral Commission was reinventing U.S. foreign policy because the USA got epically defeated by the Vietnamese people. And there was just an embarrassment for the United States. Brzezinski got into the White House. He was the national security advisor of Jimmy Carter. And starting in the late 70s, early 80s, the U.S. government poured billions of dollars into the computer revolution. And Silicon Valley was set up by the American government. And Silicon Valley is a weird, weird place. Let me just emphasize that. It's a very, very weird, weird place. And the Stanford Research Institute, which is Stanford University, but it's their research hub, is known to be a center not only of technology and computer-linked research, and not only of U.S. intelligence gathering, but also of occultism, right? Marilyn Ferguson, who was the spiritual advisor, the psychic of Al Gore, she comes out of the Stanford Research Institute. She wrote this bizarre book called The Aquarian Conspiracy that was published in 1980, all about how there's this explosion of consciousness happening around the world. It's not pro-communist, it's not anti-communist, but it promotes psychedelic drugs and it promotes hypnosis, and it's going to just tear apart everything and bring us back into balance with Mother Nature. You look at that, I mean, it's wild. But Marilyn Ferguson, the spiritual advisor to Al Gore, is this weird occult guru, and she's set up in Silicon Valley, Stanford Research Institute, California. Al Gore, who is Al Gore, right? What is Al Gore famous for? He says, well, Tipper and I, we are really proud of the fact that I invented the internet. And that's why I'm really upset about global warming, because I invented the internet. But he said he invented the internet. And then the guys who did invent the internet came forward and defended him because they said nobody was a bigger supporter of government subsidies of computer research and the computer revolution than Al Gore. Al Gore, who's got Marilyn Ferguson, the occult guru, going, yes, I'm getting messages from beyond, and it's telling me what. The whole thing is very, very weird. Silicon Valley is a very, very weird place. And Silicon Valley is all about degrowth, right? They think there are too many people in the world. They want to reduce the population. Very, very weird place. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting way ahead of myself. But anyway, so the computer revolution gets going. And in the early 80s, right, all the CIA-linked liberals, right, they're suddenly promoting computers, right? You listen to, for example, the intellectual drug promoter, Timothy Leary, right, who went, it was the drug guru who was all over the United States promoting hallucinogenic drugs during the 1960s. Timothy Leary, he comes back to the United States. He goes to prison. When he gets out of prison, he goes on a speaking tour. And the speaking tour is all about how computers are going to save the world, right? And in addition to that, you have Jerry Rubin, the 1960s radical. And he writes this book, Growing Up at 35. And he goes around and he declares he's no longer a yippie, he's a yuppie. And he's talking about the computer revolution, how computers are going to save the world, right? And if you look at what the CIA was doing in the 80s, they were funding the computer revolution, and they had a treaty, the Treaty of Multilateral Technology Controls, that prevented the Soviet Union from getting any of this technology. And the computer revolution happened, and it was like the Roaring 20s. As the Soviet Union was falling, as China was opening up to foreign investment, you had the dot-com boom in the United States. The Bill Clinton years, the economy was very strong. You had the dot-com boom that happened. And they said, wow, right? It was the end of history. The Soviet Union had fallen. China was having market reforms, and the U.S. economy was exploding because of the internet. And, the 90s, the mid 90s, the late 90s, the economy is just doing really, really, really well. It's starting to do really, really well. And they're saying, oh, see, capitalism is just so efficient. Just like they said Ford has overtaken Marx. It was the exact same spirit. Except this time they said the Soviet Union's fallen. It's the end of history. And look, we've got computers, and computers are so efficient. We've got all these new computer companies that are starting up. It's the dot-com boom. And capitalism is just so efficient now. And we're going to have prosperity forever and all of that. But you get to the end of the 90s, 1999, the Asian markets crashed. The Asian markets crashed. And that was actually engineered. Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, all these Asian economies that the USA had propped up as a barrier against communism during the Cold War, they were kind of a necessary thing that the United States didn't particularly like. Lee Kuan Yew, the leader of Singapore, like the dictator of Singapore, was like a nationalist. And, he was doing a lot of things that the American government didn't like. And, he stuck it to the American government, in a lot of different ways. And And, you had, Taiwan was getting a lot of investment from the Chinese mainland. And you had South Korea that had built itself up with Park Chung-hee. And you had these strong economies in Asia. And so George Soros, I'm not making this up, look it up for yourself. George Soros and a number of his buddies pulled all of their money out of the Asian markets. 1999, 1998, 1999, crash of the Asian markets. And then, right, as George W. Bush is coming into office, you have the 2000 election. George W. Bush comes into office, and all of a sudden, people in America are losing their jobs, and people in America are losing their homes, and the economy starts slowing down. And people have never seen anything like this. How is this happening? What's going on? What's going on? The economy is slowing down. 9/11 happens, and after 9/11, what does George W. Bush do? Right? He's on TV giving a press conference. My fellow Americans, we have been attacked by the terrorists. And that's why we got to invade Iraq, even though Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. They're both Muslims, and Muslims are all terrorists. I'm George W. Bush. And he's on there on television, and they say, Mr. President, what can Americans who want to help their country do? He's like, if you want to help defeat Al-Qaeda, if you want to defeat the terrorists, you should go shopping. And everyone thought that was the stupidest thing they ever heard. Go shopping? Seriously? We want to help our country. There's a wave of patriotism. Go shopping. And then, as George W. Bush is telling Americans to go shopping, we now find out that Alan Greenspan, the libertarian who ran the Federal Reserve for many years, the protege of Ayn Rand, like Ayn Rand's boyfriend, literally, her like teenage boyfriend, Ayn Rand's boyfriend, and her teenage protege boyfriend, he was the head of the Federal Reserve Bank, and he is going to Congress and he's saying the U.S. economy is going to collapse if Americans don't keep spending money. We need Americans to keep spending money. And so he gets Congress to just rip up all the laws around lending money. It used to be that a lot of states had a limit on how much interest you could charge. And it was called a usury law. And Paul Volcker, who was appointed by Jimmy Carter to run the Federal Reserve, he got rid of he passed a law that overturned all the state usury laws. But then after that, you had Alan Greenspan, and Alan Greenspan was in the Federal Reserve, and they were just ripping up all the rules around credit card debt, around mortgage lending, and all of this. And they were just sending, and I remember this, right? You would get credit cards in the mail every day during these years, credit cards with, unlimited. I mean, it was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. And it only worked for a little while. And as George W. Bush was leaving office, the economy crashed. And what was the big moment? What ultimately caused the economy to crash? They said the housing bubble burst. Now, what did that mean, that the housing bubble burst? Well, the housing bubble was the fact that Americans couldn't afford to keep buying homes, right? They got household debt, they got student debt, all the good paying industrial jobs are gone. Americans can't afford to keep buying homes, but they had to keep the housing markets alive. So they created all kinds of loans, housing mortgage loans that were bullshit, right? You would have a loan for your home and you'd pay for 2 years, and then your mortgage would triple in the third year. No one's going to be able to handle that, right? If your monthly payment is the same for 2 years, and then all of a sudden out of the blue it triples, unless you get a job that pays you 3 times as much, you're screwed. You're out on the street. And so all kinds of Americans are losing their homes, and they can't, and the mortgage loans are not working out. All of a sudden Americans can't buy homes anymore, and Americans aren't able to buy homes anymore. The housing market just crashes because Americans can't afford to buy homes. So what happened? In Nevada, all kinds of people who lost their homes are living in tents outside of Las Vegas. And in Los Angeles, all kinds of people who lose their homes are moving into Skid Row in Los Angeles. All over the country, you have people living in tent cities. People are homeless. Why? Because there's too many houses. Because the market has stopped because people can't afford to keep buying houses. People become homeless because there are too many houses. It's a crisis of overproduction. It's the very problem that capitalism has always had. And the economy comes to a grinding halt, and the housing bubble bursts because Americans can't afford to keep buying houses. And there's all these houses on the market that can't be sold, and the economy comes crashing down. People become homeless because there are too many houses. It's a crisis of overproduction. It's a value crisis, like Peter Coffin calls it. And the same problem. And all of a sudden, everything that we've talked about, right? They talk about jobs being replaced by technology. Artificial intelligence can trade stocks better than people can. Artificial intelligence can do anything, right? Nowadays, right? It used to be, we print all kinds of books with the Center for Political Innovation. We love the books that we print. And we're really glad that we can print these books. You know why? Because it doesn't cost us anything. I mean, except we pay to have it laid out, maybe. We pay for the cover design, but uploading it doesn't cost us anything. It used to be 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you wanted to publish a book, you had to print 5,000 copies of it, or it wasn't cost effective, right? It wasn't cost effective. If you didn't print 5,000 copies of the book, no publishing house would take your deal. Now, these books are what they call print on demand, because it used to be that the reason you had to do 5,000 copies of every book was there were these huge factories they called book binderies, and there would be thousands of people who were hired as book binders, and they had a union, the bookbinders union, and they would be there and they would work these big machines that would print the pages and cut the pages and put them in the they did all. Now none of that is necessary. Now Amazon has this machine, and they put the electronic files into the machine, and beep, and a book comes out. A book comes out of the machine. No human labor necessary. Maybe to push the button, and that's it. All right? And so much less human labor is necessary. Right? I mean, human productivity has greatly expanded because of technology. Right? It used to be there are hundreds of guys working all day, sweating hot in that book bindery. And now you have a situation where there's one person who pushes a button. Oh, somebody ordered a copy of Who Are the Houthis? Beep, he pushes a button, book comes out, they drop it in the mail. End of story. Right? This is a huge leap. And in a rational society, this would lead to great things. But in our society, it's leading to an economic crisis. We've got a generation of young people that are stuck in low-wage, short-term service sector jobs. During the financial crisis of 2008, way back in 2008, it seems like an eternity ago now. In 2008, they were saying, oh, all these young people, instead of working in factories, they're going to all have to work in retail. But now retail is a thing of the past because all the retail stores have closed down. All the malls have closed down. People order from Amazon. So now they're not working in retail no more. They're working in an Amazon warehouse where they get minimum wage and they get treated like shit and they don't get to pee when they want to. And they're getting paid barely anything. I'm telling you, this is a crisis. And they talk about how self-driving cars are 1 or 2 years away. Pretty soon, automated, artificial intelligence cars are going to drive themselves. This is a disaster. And it shouldn't be a disaster because technology is good. And technological advancement should lead to a more comfortable life, except under this irrational system of production organized for profit, it's leading to an economic crisis. But it's not leading to an economic crisis in China. In China, they're speeding right ahead. In China, living standards are going up. In China, millions of people have been raised out of poverty. In China, they're making the fastest trains in the world. They're getting helium-3 from the far side of the moon. They're doing all this amazing stuff. It's not leading to an economic crisis. Why? Because in China, the banks and the factories and the centers of economic power are not operated according to profit. They have state-run industries, and they have a 5-year economic plan, and they have Communist Party leaders that go and tell the corporations what to do, and the Chinese economy is under the control of the state. I've been to China. Caleb is telling me the truth. Thank you. There's a lot of private companies, and a lot of millionaires, and a lot of billionaires, and a lot of people making money, but at the end of the day, the market doesn't have the final say. State central planners who represent the Communist Party have the final say. And that's why they can make a decision as the government. We are going to make the fastest trains in the world, and they allocate the resources and they do it. They can make a decision as the government. We are going to go into fusion energy. We are going to go into fusion energy, and they do it. And they make the best phones in the world. And they're doing all of this because they don't have the irrationality of the market. Profits are not in command. And this is the tragedy of the moment that we are in. The system where production is organized to make profits for a small group of private owners, that system has become historically outmoded. And the artificial restraints on human growth and technological advancement that come from the capitalist mode of production are destroying Western civilization. Whereas there's a whole section of the world centered around Russia and China and Venezuela and Cuba and Iran and Syria and Zimbabwe, and there's a whole section of the world that isn't part of it, that has a rationally planned economy. And because of that, their economy is continuing to grow. And we are entering a crisis, a civilization crisis, where the leaders are panicking and they're saying, how can we save human civilization? How can we stop this disaster? And the capitalists and the rich and powerful are fighting among each other. And so they are convinced the only way they can stay in power is with degrowth. Forcibly drive down living standards, impoverish people, set up an authoritarian state, reduce consumption, reduce the population. And they are pumping out an anti-human, pessimistic message. And they're using Silicon Valley and the information technology to control people, to make people bitter and hopeless, to incite people against each other. And they're trying to forcibly degrow to save their system from this crisis. And of course, they're gearing us up for all-out war against Russia and China and against this new economy that exists in the world, because it's a threat to them. You know, it's a threat to them. So what we ultimately need is we need the same thing that they've got in China over here. Different, right? We're never going to have a Chinese government over here. We're never going to have the Chinese system. We need to do it our own way. In China, they call their system socialism with Chinese characteristics. What we need in America is socialism with American characteristics. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Imagine that, a government of action that fights for working families, a government of action that fights for working families, that controls the means of production, the banks and the factories and the industries, and forces the economy to work in the interest of society overall, that plans out the economy so growth continues and technology continues advancing and our living standards continue to go up and we become wealthier and we trade with other countries and they become wealthier and our young people and our children get smarter and happier and more optimistic and we have a better world. Imagine that. Imagine a society where technological advancement and human expansion were no longer at odds with each other, but walked hand in hand to expand and advance humanity. That is socialism, right? That is socialism. And we're in a new era, right? And the Soviet way of doing things is not coming back. And we're never going to adopt a foreign form of socialism, Chinese or Cuban or Korean socialism. And there's a lot that we can talk about. The global communist movement has really changed. A lot of things have changed. But this is the perspective, right? We need to build a movement in the United States that says what we need is a government of action to fight for working families, a government that organizes the economy to work in the interests of public good and not the profits of a wealthy few. That is what we ultimately need. And we need to reject the low-wage police state. We need to reject their vision for World War III. We need to promote optimism and community and love of country and love of family and start trying to advance civilization to a higher plane. That's what we ultimately need. And we need to break America out of imperialism because this country began with a revolution. against the British Empire. The British Empire was a degrowth system. It was about holding back development around the world, controlling the trade routes, and centralizing the wealth into the bankers of London. And the founders of this country wanted development. They wanted economic development. And they wanted, Alexander Hamilton wanted a national bank, and it was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that was the founding of America, was based on the understanding that we won't be degrown and we won't be a colony. We want economic development. That is what we want. And that's what America is all about originally. Now, obviously, there's a lot of ugly things in American history too. Murder of the Native Americans, slavery, and that some of the way we economically developed was pretty ugly and awful. And there's a spiritual problem here, right? The ghosts of all the lives that were lost and the trauma of the brutal way in which the native people were subdued, in which Mexico was robbed, California and Texas were stolen from Mexico, and the slaughter of the indigenous people, and the trauma of the transatlantic slave trade, and what was done to the black community with Jim Crow and lynching and segregation. There's all kinds of spiritual trauma here. There's all kinds of pain. But the central aspect of American society is a will to survive. The central aspect of what it means to be an American is that you believe you can work hard for something better for the next generation. You believe you can achieve your dreams. That is what it means to be an American. That is the goodness at the center of the American message. I mean, with all the bad stuff, all the colonialism and wars and jingoism and all of that, scrape all of that aside. The essence of what it means to be an American is that you have a will to survive, you have a will to overcome hardship, and you have a will to work towards something better. That is the essence of what it means to be an American. The black people of this country were brought here in chains and subjected to genocidal treatment, but the black Americans are the highest achieving athletes in the world, the highest achieving entertainers in the world. Why? Because they are the people that survived one of the most brutal and horrendous genocidal systems ever. So the black people of America are some of the strongest people on the planet. And this is a nation also of immigrants, of people who came here voluntarily because they wanted a better life. And that there's so many examples that America is a country that's all about grit and hard work and struggle, right? That is what it means to be an American. And grit and hard work and struggle is why China makes the fastest trains in the world. Grit and hard work and struggle is how Russia is able to hold itself together and pull through the disaster of the fall of the Soviet Union and rebuild itself to what it is today. And grit and hard work and struggle is what keeps the Korean Workers' Party in power on the northern part of the Korean Peninsula and keeps the Korean revolutionary movement solid against everything that has been thrown at them. Grit, hard work, and struggle is what has kept Cuba, an island that has been subjected to so much subversion and sanctions, and yet they still have the world's best medical school. They still have an amazing education system. They send literacy volunteers all over the planet. There is something American in the countries of the world that have moved towards socialism. And right now, Vietnam is having an economic miracle right now. They're using a socialist-oriented market economy to raise their people up out of poverty. And China has had huge growth. And we're seeing all over the planet, socialism has adjusted to use market mechanisms, to not impose the ideology on people in the ways it did before, to tolerate and embrace people of faith and religion. Communism has changed because there were big problems during the Cold War, and that Cold War way of doing things, it had many great achievements, and I will never let anyone tell me it failed, right? The country that defeated the Nazis, invented space travel, industrialized, and became a superpower overnight, that's not a failure, okay? Problems, yes. Failure, no. I'll never accept that it failed, but it had problems, and they needed to adjust, right? And, if you look at China, and if you look at the modern communist world, they've adjusted the way they do things, right? There's a new phase that comes after the initial industrialization. But I'm getting ahead of myself. the point is that there is something very, very American, very, very American in the global socialist movement. And I learned that from a great writer named Anna Louise Strong. Anna Louise Strong was a great American writer. She was from the Midwest, from Ohio. Her father was a Christian minister, and she wrote beautiful books because she moved to the Soviet Union. She moved to China. She was a friend of Mao, but everything she wrote was optimistic and patriotic and spiritual. I am so thankful. I'm so thankful that I discovered the writings of Anna Louise Strong when I was a teenager. She was a communist who gave me a different feeling, right? Because so much of the communist movement is about bitterness and rage and oppression and vengeance, and not Anna Louise Strong. Anna Louise Strong, even though her views may have changed, everything she wrote was very Christian in its orientation. It was about love for the community, love for the country. You read what she wrote about the Wobblies, you read all of that. Anna Louise Strong was very, very, very amazing. So, I can talk about all these things, but this is my message to you tonight. I want you to understand that what China is doing on the moon right now, and China's space program, is so much deeper than just China launched a spacecraft. This is about a dying system in the West of radical individualism, of atomization that's deteriorating into degrowth and pessimism and hate. And it is about a rising new economy in the world, which America would be much better off to join than to fight against. And that there are some people, let me just throw this out there. There are some people that call themselves communists and socialists that don't see it in terms of America would be better off joining this economy, that don't see it in terms of there's a new world rising, and if you really love America, you should want us to join this new world and have a new economy to make a better America. They don't see socialism as a government of action fighting for working families. There are some people who say they support China, say they support Russia, say they support Venezuela and all these countries, and they want the United States to fall. They just think, screw this country, America's an evil, racist country and all of that. Those people are not communists in my view, because they're not opposed to imperialism. They're not opposed to capitalism. They just hate this country. And those people, if you really get down to it, they're not mad about imperialism. They're not mad about people being homeless because there are too many houses, people being hungry because there's too much food. They're not mad about this government spending billions to bomb Gaza and give Israel weapons while the people are starving here. What they're mad about is that they are mad at average Americans. They're mad that there's average Americans going to church on Sunday. They're mad that there's people in the United States that wave the flag. They're mad at average people for being normal and not being part of their angry woke subculture, right? And that's not me, right? My socialism is rooted in love for my country, love for my community. And that is the only type of socialism that we need, right? And the imperialists actually find the other type of socialism to be useful because they're trying to degrow the United States. And if you build a mob of freaks who want to destroy the United States, and think that America is an evil country that deserves to be poorer, it's quite useful in trying to make the country poorer, right? It's not really a threat. And teaching people to hate themselves and teaching people to hate their neighbors and resent their neighbors is a very, very effective way of tearing down a country and degrowing, which is exactly what the imperialists want to do and need to do in order to save their system. So, the woke stuff serves a very sinister purpose. And some of those woke people, very few of them defend Russia and China, but some do. Small minority that do, but they don't get it. They don't get it. And what makes the Center for Political Innovation so unique is that we are optimistic, we are patriotic, and we are motivated by love of country, love of community. We are in love with our community, and we're trying to build a group of people who stand arm in arm and stand up for their communities, take responsibility for the future, and demand that we get beyond a system where profits come before people. We get beyond a system where the elite are trying to atomize us down into into individuals, right? That is what we're doing, right? We're engaging in radical community building. Communism, community building, that's what we're doing. So I just wanted to throw all of that out there. Those are my opening thoughts for tonight. But I'm sure that, a lot of people have thoughts. And it's funny, I didn't, that rant, this was just kind of spontaneous. I was going to talk a little bit about spacecraft from China. And then from there, I was going to read to you some from our new CPI textbook and all of that. But that opening rant there, that was an hour and 10 minutes I just gave you. That was very spontaneous. And I think now we can do the roll call. After the roll call, I've got a few super chats, but I've got some other stuff I can do. I'm going to be on here for a while tonight. The night is young, as they say. It's 10:41 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I can go till well after midnight. So super chats are great. They get me talking. But let's do the roll call. Let's do that roll call. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. And start sending some super chats. Get me talking in the second half of the show. Names and locations. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Mark Jones in Utica, New York. Alex Rickle in Oregon. Seasoned Noob in China. Battle Cossack Gonza. JT24 Mississippi. Madison, Wisconsin. Luca Clemente. Donnie Wallace in Four Oaks, North Carolina. Bob Troy in New York. Pennsylvania. Ty Blay. Denver, Colorado. Mohsen from Iran. David in Vietnam, Jamie from Boise, Idaho, Cyrus, Auckland, Florida, North Carolina, Chaz, Beretta, Folkestone, England, Patrick in Maine, Miguel in Linwood, California, Josh in St. Louis, Missouri, Ellie in Chicago. Love you, Ellie. Alex in London, Shanty in Mexico, Joe in Los Angeles. Are you going to be at the event, Joe? Friday night, I'm in Los Angeles giving a speech. Are you going to be there? You going to be there? Fox from the Bronx. Or Jorge from the Bronx, Jenny in Cincinnati, San Diego, California, New Plymouth, New Zealand, David in Baltimore, Northern Manitoba, Channeled Scablins, Washington State, Steve and Ann in Ringgold, Georgia, Caleb's distant cousin, Eric. You're my distant cousin? I've never met. I did not know I had a distant cousin, Eric. Tony in Utah, Tampa, Florida. Herb Bryant. Good stuff. Steve and Ann in Ringgold, Georgia. April and Chris in Salt Lake City. I love it when couples watch our show. That is awesome. April and Chris in Salt Lake City. Steve and Ann in Ringgold, Georgia. I think there was a couple up in Washington State who watched us. There's a couple in Brooklyn who watch us. I love that. I love that stuff. Names and locations. Tony in Utah. Welcome, Tony. Good to have you with us, Tony in Utah. Names and locations. I will call you all out. Dan is in Los Angeles. I hope to see folks on Friday night. Right. So if you didn't see me earlier, Friday night, I am giving a speech at LA Family Church. I am the guest speaker at the Los Angeles Family Church. They are having a North and South Korea Unity Symposium, Removing the Line, in Los Angeles, California. It's going to be a great event. And I am an invited guest speaker, and it's not letting me show the thing on the screen for some reason. I don't know why StreamYard is doing that. So there's the link to the tweet that'll tell you the location. It is in Monterey Park. The address is 2301 Finley Avenue, Monterey Park, California. It's going to be an awesome event. So I hope you're there. And I guess before I start answering people's super chat questions, I am going to tell you a couple things. So the minister out there, thank you, Jorge. So Jorge just sent a sticker. I appreciate that. The minister out there is a friend of mine named Joshua Holmes, and he is a minister. This is a video that from his sermon that he gave today, which I was listening. I figure I'm going to be out there towards the end of the week. I might as well listen to what his sermon's going to be. This is from his sermon that he gave today.
I hear this rhetoric nowadays, which is, it would be better off if human beings just died. Shocking, right? On Magda, wow. But I hear this rhetoric. It's like, it's better, it'd be better for this world if human beings were to just pass away. It's this really kind of, in my opinion, it's quite painful thing to say. But I hear this rhetoric more and more often, especially when I was in college, which was gladly not too long ago, right? And in my college time, I'd read these posts from people. It's like, this world would be better off. We are we're almost like a disease somehow to this world. But that is completely, anti what God has created this world for. Is that we are designed, we were brought into this world as God's sons and daughters for the purpose of taking care of this world. Have we done the best of jobs? No. Have we made our best effort? I think some people have made a great effort. But we still have a ways to go in terms of having good dominion over creation. But we're not called to leave this world. We're called to take care of it, to own it, and allow it to blossom even further. Allow creation to be fulfilled. We participate in fulfilling God's life and ideal when the love of God flows through us and touches all things in this world. And it goes.
Yeah, I can agree with everything he just said there. So it's going to be an interesting event. I will warn you all, right? This is an interesting event because this church that I'm going out there with, they're very conservative. I mean, they take no political stances, but they have historically been quite conservative and quite anti-communist historically. But they want peace on the Korean Peninsula. They are committed to peace on the Korean Peninsula. Their founder actually received one of the highest medals from the North Korean government before he died. He received the Reunification Medal from Kim Jong-il, which was quite an honor before he died. And they it's going to be an interesting night. And I am working on giving a powerful presentation that will speak in a way that I know there's going to be a lot of people there who have never heard the pro-North Korean perspective, never heard a pro-socialistic perspective on the Korean crisis and how we can reunify. And I am going to give it in a way that they can hear it. But I'm going to be true to myself. I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not. I'm not going to say things I don't believe, but I'm going to do it carefully. And I'm working on my presentation right now because I want to do it in a way that it can come across to people. And I feel like this is going to be one of the most important speeches I ever gave. And that sounds weird, right? You'd think, well, Caleb, you're flying out to LA. You're going to speak to a church group. Not a big deal. I think it's one of the most important speeches that I ever gave because I think it's going to be. I don't know. Maybe it won't be, but I feel like it's going to be. And the reason that I feel that way is because my whole slogan, the name of our textbook is Out of the Movement to the Masses. It is about learning to work with people and cooperate with people who are not part of this leftist space that is going nowhere and is actually quite toxic, right? It's about engaging with people about these ideas and about how we can build a movement that is pro-humanity and pro-growth in a way that is unorthodox and new and exciting and can speak to people from different backgrounds and find common ground. What can we agree on? Clifford says he's going to be there. Excellent. I'm looking forward to meeting you, Clifford. And I am excited. And actually, in the epigraph of this book, right? The opening quotation. The opening quotation of this book is a quote from Mao Zedong. And it says, unite all the forces that can be united into a broad united front against monopoly capital and against the imperialist wars and imperialist policies of aggression. Right? And I feel like this is a challenge. This is a challenge that has been put in my lap. How can I do a good job? How can I give a presentation that will speak to people, that will get people to understand another side of the story? And I am deeply thankful for this challenge. I feel like it's an honor. It is a big honor that I have received this challenge. And so I am being tested. My ability as an orator, my ability to represent unpopular viewpoints, my ability to engage with people about important issues and find common ground with people is being put to the test. And I feel like this is a great opportunity. And so I have been working on my speech all weekend, making notes, thinking about what I'm going to say and what I'm not going to say and how I'm going to frame things. And I am very excited. And so I'll tell you, I need you to be there, though. If you're out in LA, I need you to find your way there, because the more people who come out, who are more open to what I have to say, the better. And I feel like this is going to be a test of my ability to speak in different places, right? And to find common ground. And, you just heard Reverend Joshua there. I feel like politically we may not be in the same place, but you just heard him there talking about how he's pro-growth and how this anti-human sentiment bothers him, and how obviously he's concerned about the environment, but our job is to blossom and reinvent our relationship with nature. I feel like there's a spiritual connection there. Maybe not a political connection, maybe not an ideological connection. There's a spiritual connection there, right? That we connect in that way, and that bringing peace to the Korean Peninsula and building a movement to finish what Trump started, right? To continue peace on the Korean Peninsula. I think there's a very good chance Donald Trump will be president again. I think pretty soon. And if Donald Trump can restart that Korea peace process, the world would be in such a better place. I don't know if you've seen the latest about the shit balloons and all of that stuff. Stuff's not good on the Korean Peninsula right now. It is not good at all. And I feel like things could start to move in a good direction with Donald Trump in the White House again. Center for Political Innovation does not endorse any candidates, mind you. We are a nonprofit. We don't endorse any candidates. But I feel like things could move in a good direction with Donald Trump back in office. And we could play a part in, laying the groundwork for it. And so I am going out there to do my part, to be part of something bigger, and so there's a lot more that I could say about that. But we do have a few super chats to answer. So I am going to answer a couple of the super chats, right? And then after that, I do have some music I want to play, and, keep the super chats rolling in, because the night is young, as they say. So the first super chat says, Mexican exit polls declare Sheinbaum the winner. And let's look at that, right? The Mexican election results seem to be in. We have a new president of Mexico. What's going on there, right? Mexican election. Who is this new president? I liked AMLO, but it looks like we have a new president, right? Claudia Sheinbaum. So who is Claudia Sheinbaum? She's going to be the new president of Mexico, right? Who is she? Claudia Sheinbaum is a Mexican politician, scientist, and academic, head of the Mexican government, right? She was the Secretary of the Environment under AMLO, right? Right? Okay. All right. Right? She's from AMLO's party. She's from the Party of Democratic Revolution, and then she's now part of the Morena party. She's from AMLO's coalition. And she's apparently quite charismatic, right? And she's endorsed by the Labor Party, which is the Communist Party in Mexico, the PT, which is the biggest communist party that is represented in the Mexican government. She's endorsed by them. But she's endorsed by other parties that are in the Morena coalition. It looks like she won the presidency. That seems like a good development. AMLO was not Lenin. AMLO was not some communist leader who was leading Mexico towards socialism. But AMLO is the best president Mexico has had in 100 years, right? AMLO, in terms of economic development, in terms of being friendly to Venezuela, in terms of bringing jobs and de-escalating the drug wars and such, AMLO has done a heck of a job, right? He is like the best president Mexico has had in a really long time, and he's worked, the deep state of Mexico is not on his side. It's completely infiltrated by the CIA and the FBI and American stuff. And Mexico has been the United States military playground for a lot of time. But he's been pushing an uphill battle, and they stole the elections from him twice. Finally, after Trump was in, there was enough space between the United States and Mexico. They could let him win. And I like AMLO. So this new leader, Claudia Sheinbaum, let's see what she does, right? Let's see what she does. I think her continuing the AMLO tradition will probably be a good thing, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see. I try not to ever judge any politician by what they say. I judge them by what they do, right? Because anyone can say anything. Joe Biden, that speech he gave when he came into office after Donald Trump was defeated was great. Said a lot of things about infrastructure, and none of it happened. None of it happened. None of it. Donald Trump, on the other hand, said a whole lot of awful things that horrify me about women, about Muslims, about immigrants. Donald Trump has said all kinds of horrible things. When he was president, I mean, he did some bad things. He murdered Qasem Soleimani. He moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. But compared to Biden, he was a way better president than Biden, even though he said awful things. Biden talked way better than Trump did, but as president, he's been worse. Trump talked more horrifically, but compared to Biden, he was a much better president. So I don't judge politicians by what they say. I judge them by what they do. And that will be my approach to Claudia Sheinbaum. I am going to judge her the way I judged AMLO, by what she does. AMLO, he did a pretty good job, as good as one could do. I do not envy AMLO the job he had to do, and I really do not envy Claudia Sheinbaum to be the head of a government and a police force and a military that's thoroughly infiltrated by the CIA and have the endorsement of the Communist Party and be kind of anti-imperialist and socialistic minded while you're leading. That's not an easy job, right? So I wish her success, and I think it's a great thing that she has won the elections, but the jury is still out. I will judge her by what she does, not by what she says. That is my approach. So there you go. Let me see another super chat we can answer here. The night is young. Keep the super chats rolling in. I'm here to answer your questions. All right. So we got the Mexican election results. Thoughts about Trump at the UFC, right? So I haven't watched all of that. I obviously can't show it on here. But Donald Trump apparently told the UFC fighting people, one of them asked him if he will stop the war in Gaza. He will stop the fighting between Israel and Palestine. He said yes. My concern is how, right? Because Donald Trump panders very hard to Israel. And there's people openly at this point talking about just genocide or forced removal of the Palestinians from Gaza. Right. I mean, there's Dennis Prager made a video all about World War II didn't actually end until we dropped the atomic bomb. And we got, members of Congress, openly talking about nuclear weapons. And, I don't know. I don't know if what Trump said is actually good. What I think is in Trump's favor is that Trump is selfish and Trump is a narcissist. And that's a good thing. Because Trump's narcissism and selfishness has Trump constantly worried about how he's going to be remembered by history. Right? And because of that, Donald Trump wouldn't do a lot of the things that they wanted him to do because he's more concerned with how he looks in the history books than pleasing the deep state. Right? Donald Trump's selfishness is actually one of his best attributes. Right? And I mean, Donald Trump is constantly thinking about how am I going to look on the monument? How am I going to be remembered in the history books? And because of that, he wouldn't do certain things that they wanted him to do. And he did, some things they wanted him to do. For example, Donald Trump, he's got all these conservatives and neocons around him. He just said, I'm bored of Venezuela. And did you hear about that? He just said in a meeting, I'm bored of Venezuela. I'm just bored of Venezuela. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm sick of it. And Elliot Abrams and John Bolton and all of that were like, what do you mean you're bored of it? He said, I'm just bored of it. I just don't care about Venezuela. He tried to pull off a coup in Venezuela and all that. And then Donald Trump at the meeting is just like, I'm bored of Venezuela. I don't want to talk about it. Okay. I'm done. Well, that's Trump being a narcissist, right? You're not supposed to be bored with countries. You're supposed to be, committed to spreading freedom. And that's not Trump. So I'm hoping that Donald Trump's selfishness can be an asset. Trump went to North Korea for very selfish reasons. Trump wanted to be remembered as the American president who possibly made peace with North Korea, who possibly got North Korea to give up their nukes. He wanted that picture of him shaking hands with Kim Jong-un to go down in history. I think it was a very selfish motivation he had for doing what he did in North Korea. Fine. I'm fine with that. Great. That is absolutely fine. I was absolutely fine because he's being selfish. He's not thinking in the interests of the imperialist state. Right. And, maybe we're in a weird historical moment where what America needs is a deranged narcissist to do something good. I am telling you, Donald Trump was an awful president. He murdered Qasem Soleimani. He destroyed U.S., the hope for U.S. improving relations with Iran. He pandered to Israel backwards and forwards. He wasn't a great president. But compared to Biden, he was a saint. Okay. And I know nobody wants to hear that. And that's blasphemy on the left. And it's like, I'm not telling you to go out and campaign for Trump. Okay. I'm certainly not telling you to do that, especially if you are a Muslim. I mean, if you're a Muslim, I couldn't imagine doing such a thing. But I'm telling you that in my personal opinion, Donald Trump is the lesser of two evils. I'm not going to be campaigning for him. I'm not going to be out in the streets saying vote Trump. But I'll tell you that in my analysis, Donald Trump could possibly be the lesser of two evils. And, if you vote for the lesser of two evils, you still get evil. So, I'm not endorsing Trump, but I'm telling you the way it looks to me and the fact that they're trying to throw him in jail to keep him from being president, that all looks like a good sign to me. But, there's also some thoughts that I have about the whole frame up thing, and we can talk about that later. But yeah, so yeah, the UFC interview, he said he's going to stop the war in Gaza. What does that mean, though? What does that mean? What does that mean? I don't know. I don't know what that means. So now, folks, I'm going to do, I'm a little worried about this because I feel like this would change the pace a little bit. But last night, I woke up in the middle of the night because I was dreaming of one of my favorite songs. Oh, thank you. And I will definitely answer that. Right. But I was dreaming of one of my favorite songs. There's a song that I heard years ago. And every so often it just comes back to me. Right. I forget about it. I don't think about it. And then it just comes back to me. It's a song. So when I was a kid, I'll just tell you a story. When I was a kid, my parents were very, very strict about what TV I could watch and stuff like that. And I remember, I got a clock radio for my bedroom. It had an alarm clock on it and had a radio on it. And I listened to the radio before I went to sleep at night. And then my alarm clock woke me up in the morning. And my parents were very strict that I not listen to regular commercial radio because they did not want me to hear cuss words and sex and whatever. So they insisted that my radio be tuned to 89.7 WKSU, the NPR station, the public radio station of Kent State University in Ohio. So I listened every night to classical music before I went to sleep on the weeknights, and then in the evenings on the weekends, on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they had a folk music show. So I would listen to folk music, and this song came out at some point in the 90s when I was a kid. I don't know when. And this song, I just liked the tune. I didn't even know what it was about. And it wasn't until years later I learned what it was about. So this song is actually, it's a historical ballad, and it is about the Mann Gulch fire. I don't know if people have ever heard of this. It's an obscure historical incident. August 5th, 1949, there was a huge fire in Montana, in the U.S. state of Montana. And it was a huge fire that happened, the Mann Gulch fire. And 13 firefighters died in the fire. And they were what they call smoke jumpers. They were paratrooper firefighters. There was a forest fire in Montana, and they flew them in and they airdropped them, and they were going to put out the fire, and they died. And the reason that they died was because they were cornered. They were in an area where they couldn't get away from the flames. And one of them lived. And the way that he lived was that he lit a fire of his own, right? And apparently this is, if you ever get caught in a forest fire, this is what you're supposed to do, right? If you're in an area where you can't escape a forest fire, the way to protect yourself is you light a fire around yourself to burn out all the brush around yourself to protect yourself from the flames. And so this one firefighter had read comic books when he was a kid, and it said that if you're trapped and there's a forest fire coming, light a fire around yourself, light a little fire around yourself to burn out the brush, and then the fire won't come around you as much, and you won't get consumed by the smoke. So this one firefighter lit a match and burned, a bunch of the brush around himself. And he didn't die in the flames, but the other firefighters were panicking. And they were like, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. You're lighting a fire to put out a fire. And they didn't listen to him, and they died in the fire. And so this one firefighter survived because he'd read this comic book when he was a kid that said, if you're trapped in a forest fire, light a fire of your own to protect yourself. Wild story, but it's a famous incident. They've actually made Hollywood movies about the Mann Gulch fire and all of that. It's a wild incident that happened in 1949. This one firefighter survived. 13 other firefighters died. And the way he survived was he fought fire with fire. That's the expression. You ever hear the expression, fight fire with fire? That's what it comes from. If there's a forest fire coming, and the moral of the story is listen to the crazy guy. Of course, Jenny, of course. But anyway, so I am going to put on this song. It's called Cold Missouri Waters. And it is a ballad. It is a sweet ballad telling the story of the Mann Gulch fire. It's actually one of my favorite songs, but I forget about it. It's weird. It's like that. What do you call it? You ever watch Men in Black? They have that thing. Forget about it. I get really into this song every so often, and then I forget about it for 2 or 3 years, and then it just comes back to me. And last night it came back to me in a dream, and I remembered Cold Missouri Water, the Mann Gulch fire. So I've been thinking about this song today. I'm going to put on Cold Missouri Water. And after that, I'll answer more of the super chats. So, and if you have more super chats, keep them coming because I got plenty. The night is young, as they say. So yeah, I will put on, here we go. Cold Missouri Waters by James Kelligan and Hugh McMillan.
My name is Dodge, then you know that. 'Cause it's written on the chart there at the foot end of the bed. They think I'm blind, or I can't read it. Well, I've read it every word, and every word it says is death. So confession, is that the reason that you came? Get it off my chest before I check out of the game. Since you mention it, well, there's 13 things I'll name. 13 crosses high above the cold Missouri water. August 49, West Montana. The hottest day on record. The forest tinder dry. Lightning strike in the mountains. I was crew chief at the jump base. I prepared those boys to fly. Pick the drop zone. C-47 comes in low. Feel a tap upon your leg that tells you go. See the circle of that fire down below. 15 of us dropped above the cold Missouri water. Gauge the fire, I'd seen bigger. So I ordered them to Side Hill and we'd fight it from below. We'd have our backs to that river. Yeah, we'd have it licked by morning, even if we took it slow. But the fire crown that jumped the valley just ahead, there was no way down. We headed for the ridge instead. Too big to fight it, we'd have to fight that slope instead. Flames one step behind above the cold Missouri water. sky had turned red, the smoke was boiling. 200 yards to safety, death was 50 yards behind. I don't know why, I just thought it. I struck a match to waist-high grass, running out of time. Tried to tell them, step into this fire I've set. We can't make it, this is the only chance you'll get. But they cursed me, ran for the rocks above instead, and I lay face down and prayed above the cold Missouri water. And when I rode like the phoenix, that world reduced to ashes, there were none but to survive. And I stayed that night, one day after. I carried bodies to the river, wondering how I'd stayed alive. 13 stations of the cross to mark their fall. I've had my say, and I'll confess to nothing more. And I'll join them now, those that left me long before. 13 crosses high above the cold Missouri water. 13 crosses high above the cold Missouri shore. I long to see you away, rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to see you away. Found a way across the wide Missouri.
Alrighty, so yeah, that is a song that I have loved for years, Cold Missouri Water. About a very interesting historical incident. So now I will keep answering people's super chat questions. A couple more have rolled in, so I'm just scrolling up, right? Because StreamYard is messed up and not letting me show images and being weird all around. So I'm just scrolling up, and let me see. All right, get to the next question here. Just want to answer the questions. Can we call Belarus a socialist state? I would say yes. I know I am in a minority, among socialists and leftists who say that, but I honestly don't give a shit, because socialists and leftists generally at this point, they don't support any communist government. Most socialists and leftists wouldn't call China a socialist state. They wouldn't call Vietnam a socialist state. They wouldn't call North Korea a socialist state. Most socialists and communists in America only believe in a socialism, this magical socialism in their mind that never gets criticized for human rights violations by the New York Times. I did read a very good book on Belarus, and I'm trying to see where my copy of it is because I'd like to hold it up. I actually recommend it. It's a very, very good book. If I could just find the copy of it, I have. I thought it was on my bookshelf behind me, but it's not. And it's a really good book. It's called The Last Soviet Republic, and I cannot seem to figure out where I put my copy of it, but it's a very, very good book. Where is it? Where is it? I'm just looking for all the books that I have that are of that size and seeing if it's that one. But it's a very good book called The Last Soviet Republic. I could swear I had that book just yesterday. I had it out, but it's a very, very good book. I will link it on the Amazon of the book. It's a very, very good book. I read this book a long time ago. It's a fairly old book. It's not new. It came out during the Bush administration by Stuart Parker. The Last Soviet Republic, Alexander Lukashenko's Belarus. Talks about how Belarus never really had a counter-revolution. They never privatized all the industries, and that Belarus never privatized the industries. Alexander Lukashenko basically calls himself a communist. He calls himself from the Soviet tradition. The Communist Party is the biggest political party in Belarus in the parliament. It has the most seats of any political party. They haven't privatized the industries. They still have mainly a state-run economy. They still have a very big social safety net. Alexander Lukashenko is only in power because he's wildly popular, and he has like a mass movement in the streets to back him up. And they've tried to overthrow him many times with like color revolution protests, and it never works because he delivers the goods and he has protected the people of Belarus from the free market nightmare that came in the 1990s. He is consistently anti-Israel, anti-Zionist. He is consistently, in favor of economic development. And I have a very high opinion of Lukashenko. He's one of these people we're all supposed to hate. We're all supposed to hate Lukashenko, right? He's a corrupt, authoritarian leader or whatever. And he's not pro-LGBT. That's true. He's a Christian. He's converted to the Russian Orthodox faith. He's not an atheist communist. He's a Christian. Does he call himself a communist? I mean, it's like he's in favor of 21st century socialism. He's against capitalism. He's Alexander Lukashenko, right? Hugo Chavez, when he spoke in Moscow, he praised Belarus as a great example. Is it on the shelf? Right? Do you see it? Someone says behind you, like they're pointing, like it's there, like I'm missing it. Where is it? Where is it? The Last Soviet Republic. Is it on the shelf? Am I just not seeing it? But it's a great book. Lower right corner, I see it. Oh my God, you're killing. You see it? Lower right corner. Oh my goodness. Is it your right or my right? Oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind here. Wow. Wow. Lower right corner. Where it's on the shelf. It's actually on the shelf. Is this a game where I'm going to look backwards and see my book? This is hilarious. This is hilarious. Are you gaslighting me? Are you gaslighting me? And I don't know. Whatever. I was never very good at Where's Waldo. But anyway, it's a great book. And I've been to Russia and I have met with Belarusians. I've never been to Belarus, but I've been to Russia and I've been to events where Belarusians are there. And, they use all the old Soviet logos and they're proud of the Soviet history. And, I don't know. I mean, it's just, when I talk to Belarusians, they sound like communists and anti-imperialists. They sound like advocates of socialism. They sound like opponents of Western capitalism and imperialism. They're proud of their Soviet heritage. They never had a full counter-revolution. It's got way more of a welfare state than Russia does. It's got a mostly state-run economy. I'm all of the checks and boxes for what a socialist society would be. I mean, it looks like it's a socialist country. Now, let me throw out there. I have pointed out to people that when I was a Trotskyist and when I was in the Workers' World Party and when I was in these groups, I was taught there's this magical class line. This magical class line that exists between Iran and Cuba, between Gaddafi's Libya and North Korea, right? That there are bourgeois nationalist anti-imperialist states and there are socialist anti-imperialist states. Oh, you're joking. You were messing with me. Ah, ha, ha, ha. But anyway, and I'm telling you that line is very hard to find nowadays, right? What is the economic difference between Iran and China? Not the ideological difference. In Iran, they reject Marxism. They're Muslims. They're very anti-Marxism. But what's the economic difference? They still have a state-run economy. They still have 5-year plans. They still come out of an anti-imperialist, anti-colonial revolution. They have a planned economy. I mean, what is the economic difference between China and Iran, right? And that really what it gets down to is, are you for imperialism or are you against imperialism? If you're against imperialism, you're going to have to move towards socialism. It's just a necessity. right? Because the imperialists are always going to be able to dominate the international markets. Whereas if you're on the side of the imperialists, you can never really be a socialist. You can maybe be an advocate of a welfare state or whatever, but you're never going to have a planned economy if you're on the side of the imperialists, right? So if you're anti-imperialist, you end up gradually becoming more socialistic over time. Take Russia, for example, right? Russia had a counter-revolution in the 90s. They privatized their economy. They had free market economics in the 90s. It was a disaster. And then Putin came into power and he reasserted state control over oil and gas. Great move. And he restructured their economy. And with the oil and gas revenue, he rebuilt the state sector of their economy. And, you know, they're very proud of their Soviet heritage. There's still a lot of, you know, there's a lot of a free market there, a private, vibrant market, but that market is very subsidized by the government. And at this point, all the major capitalist countries have cut off Russia. But all the communist countries like China, like Vietnam, like Cuba, like North Korea are trading with Russia like crazy right now. So is Russia a socialist society? I mean, technically, no. They don't consider themselves to be. They did have a counter-revolution. They didn't have a counter-revolution, right? They did just, but at the same time, it's like, how would Russia be different if it was a socialist country? Right? I mean, at this point, and Russia's economy is so closely tied in with the socialist economies of the world, and it's so anti-imperialist. Like, you know, all these people who sit there, is Russia socialist? It's not really socialist, Caleb. It's like, okay, I'll give you that, right? Technically, if you want to get technical, it's not. But how, like, why does that matter? Right? Russia has had to align itself with all the socialist countries in the world. It's had to reassert a huge amount of state control over the economy. I mean, so it's like, okay, I mean, if you want to be technical about it, and where is the line where Russia would be socialist? You know, at what point would Russia become socialist, right? You know, is there inequality in a socialist society? Yes. Can a socialist society have an ideology that is different than Marxism, Leninism? Absolutely, right? And the idea that ideology defines reality, that's ridiculous. So at what would Russia have to do in order to become socialist? People say, well, the Communist Party would come back to power. How does that matter? Right? That's about what they believe. What would the Communist Party do? That, I mean, you know, the Communist Party in Russia, who I have been embedded with their presidential campaigns. I've met the Russian communists many times. They have a lot of criticism of the Russian government. They want a bigger welfare state. They want more benefits. They want, you know, more government jobs, and they want to be more anti-imperialist. They think that Russia is, you know, that they were calling to shut down McDonald's ahead of time. They're ultra patriotic, but I'm not hearing from the Russian Communist Party some big dramatic overhaul that would just completely change Russia into being a socialist society again. I'm not hearing that. So, and that's where I'm at this point. It's imperialism and anti-imperialism. And socialism is the natural outgrowth of anti-imperialism. If you're anti-imperialist long enough, you're going to move towards socialism. And imperialism is leading toward disaster, free market capitalism. So, this magical class line that's supposed to exist between Marxist, Leninist, communist countries and bourgeois nationalist regimes. You know, if you look at Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, if you look at Gaddafi in Libya, if you look at Venezuela and Nicaragua, the idea that they have a different economic system than Vietnam and Cuba and North Korea and China, I don't buy that, right? And that has been a foundational aspect. And I really started thinking this way because of Libya, right? And, that's why the first book the Center for Political Innovation ever published was the Green Book. Because during the Libyan War, I read the Green Book and I studied the life of Gaddafi. And I was convinced that Gaddafi was a communist. Right? In the Green Book, they say their goal is to eventually have a stateless world, a world with no government, a stateless, classless world. He wanted to join the Warsaw Pact. He had a centrally planned economy. He was aligned with all the communist governments. And in the Green Book, he says why he's not a Marxist. He says, in Libya, we don't have a very big industrial working class. Marxism calls for the dictatorship of the proletariat. And that wouldn't make any fucking sense in Libya now, would it? Because Libya is largely a Bedouin society, farmers, etc. We have a lot of small business owners and stuff. So if we had a dictatorship of the proletariat, that would be like what, 10% of the population, 20% of the population? That doesn't make any sense. So in Libya, we don't have Marxism. We have an Islamic socialist government that represents all the people. But we have a planned economy. We don't have the free market. We have popular assemblies, popular committees that are like Soviets that run things. He lays that all out in the Green Book. This is the founding document. And I was told by the Workers' World Party and the Marxist-Leninists, no. Libya was bourgeois nationalist, not socialist. And none of them could give me a reason why, right? None of them could give me a logical reason why, other than Gaddafi didn't believe in Marxism, Leninism. He was a Muslim. He believed in Islamic socialism, etc. That's it. And socialism is not defined by what you believe. So Libya was socialist. And I think that a country can be socialist with a different ideology, and that the communist and socialist countries of the world have different ideologies. As I said, Nicaragua, Venezuela, they're led by Christians at this point, right? And that the head of the Communist Party of Russia, Gennady Zyuganov, he is himself a Christian. And that Ba'athist Arab socialism in the Arab world was largely led by Muslims, right? And that Gaddafi was a Muslim, and that you don't have to be ideologically a Marxist-Leninist in order to establish a society where the banks and the factories and the centers of economic power are organized in the interests of society, not the profits of a wealthy few. The idea that you must adopt this very specific ideology that comes from Stalin, right? It was Stalin who actually invented the term Marxism-Leninism. That you must adopt Marxism-Leninism as your state ideology in order to be socialist. That's ridiculous. That's just completely ridiculous. I mean, and that's just not how the real world works. The Soviet Union did not think this, by the way. The Soviet Union called Libya and Iraq and Syria socialist-oriented regimes. That was the term. They did not consider them to be capitalist. They called them socialist-oriented regimes. So they admitted that they were socialists. So I look at and that has led me to look at various anti-imperialist countries and say, are they socialist or not? Some of them very clearly are. Syria very clearly is a socialist country, right? Venezuela, Nicaragua, very clearly socialist. Iran, I would say, is socialistic, but it's got a very big capitalist class, and it's definitely anti-Marxist and et cetera. But you look at their economy. Some of them, though, it's not as clear, right? And like Russia, not as clear. But Belarus, it's a no-brainer to me. They never had a counter-revolution. The Communist Party is the biggest party. They never privatized the industries. They've got a popular anti-imperialist leader who hails the Soviet Union. I mean, what would Belarus have to do to really be socialist? And if you give me an answer about workers democratically electing the heads of their factories, get out of here, all right? That's, the overwhelming majority of people in America who call themselves socialists and communists are completely useless because they don't support anything that is not their fantasy of the ideal working class democracy. They support imperialism, right? And the whole point of being a socialist in the 20th century and in the 21st century is opposing imperialism. I would talk to these anarchists and these DSA types. There was only one government in the world that these people supported, and that was the Kurds in Syria. When the Kurdish separatist, group was running Syria, because they based themselves on Murray Bookchin worker democracy, they supported it. And they were also being armed by the CIA and the American government. And if you look at that, right, you look at DSA, you look at these people, the only socialist government they can bring themselves to support is one that's supported by the CIA. How do they look themselves in the face? I don't know how these people can even pretend to be revolutionaries. They're basically saying, oh, unless, the only socialists that we can support are ones that have the approval of the American government, New York Times and CNN. I'm open to supporting the Kurds, but the idea, if you only support the Kurds, you're not an anti-imperialist, right? And the whole point is about building a movement against imperialism. That's what it's all about. It's about opposing imperialism. And, the Soviet Union, they supported the Emir of Afghanistan, who was a monarchist, who was a feudalist, because he was fighting imperialism. The Soviet Union convened the Congress of the Peoples of the East to unite all kinds of Muslims, all kinds of people. Why? Because they were fighting imperialism. And Lenin himself said, it's all about fighting imperialism. And all the socialist parties of Europe sold out and supported World War I. And the Labour Party in Britain and the German Social Democratic Party, and socialism that's not anti-imperialist turns into a welfare state and has led us to exactly where we are. So non-anti-imperialist socialism is socialism I want nothing to do with. And anti-imperialism inevitably leads to socialism. So that's where I'm at. It's all about opposing imperialism. And that's why we have this new textbook, Out of the Movement to the Masses, Anti-Imperialist Organizing in America. It's all about opposing imperialism. Let me say it again. It's all about opposing imperialism. There's a system that rules the world today, a global financial system that is grinding the world into poverty, and that is what we are against. And Russia is against it, and China's against it, and the working families of America need to turn against it, because if we had a world free from imperialism, it would be a better place. That is my answer to your question. And that is how I see things. And that is my honest understanding of things. And I am an anti-imperialist. All right, scrolling up. Scrolling up. Caleb, have you seen that George Clooney's wife tweeted about issuing criminal arrests for Russian journalists? I did see that. And the European Union, and that would be for the EU countries, right? And the European Union has basically already criminalized. You can't have RT on TV in the EU. You cannot work for Russian media in the EU. And, there are Russian journalists who travel there to do reports for Russian media back home. And that's another threat on them. And it's absolutely outrageous. There's plenty of American journalists in Russia. So why? It's absolutely outrageous. But I've known for a while that the EU is not a particularly good place, for me. And that, the EU is becoming a Russia-free zone. And they're just doing everything. They're scraping the barrel, anything they can possibly do. And it's like, what's left on their list? Oh, well, we could arrest the Russian journalist. Okay. They've already seized all this property. They've closed all the Russian tea houses and all. Oh, well, we can just, it's ridiculous. So there you go. I'm outraged by that, and I'm angry that people would even think that's an acceptable thing to say, right? Would we want American journalists in Russia to get arrested? Right. Every time, they catch a Wall Street Journal guy allegedly spying and they arrest him. And it's like the end of the world. There's all kinds of American journalists all over Russia. No one seems to care. But now, this is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Well, Russia doesn't have real media. They're a bad country. It's just, come on. Right. And it's like American media has lied about Russia how many times? And I'm angry. I'm genuinely very angry that they're doing this. I'm not shocked. And I've known for a while that EU countries, are considering completely outlawing Russian journalists or making them afraid to come. And not surprised. Tech oligarchs are recognizing the need for nuclear energy. Could this weaken the grip of the oil monopolies? I have long maintained that Silicon Valley was created by that Eastern establishment, the oil monopolies, but it's its own thing now. And they are all about degrowth. And they are their own thing. They're their own center of power. Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and all of that. They may have come out of the Eastern establishment. The intelligence apparatus may have created them, and they may be liberals aligned with the Democrats. They may have the woke kind of perspective, but I would argue that they are a different thing. And that they do have their own agenda. And so I'm not surprised. And look, I will say a lot of liberals are more for nuclear power now, right? They seem, it's interesting. AOC is pro-nuclear power, and that's not the divisive issue it once was, right? I've noticed that among the Jacobin and people like that, there are pro-nuclear people. Excellent stream. Well, thank you, Peter. Excellent work Peter's doing. Peter does great work. Peter does great. He sent me a great video by Shuan Head the other day, and I watched it. I was just blown away. Peter is a great friend, and he does great work. All righty. I'm just scrolling. China has developed a successful cure for diabetes. My name is Wilford Brimley, and I have diabetes. I don't know about this. I hear things like this sometimes about different countries, and I have to fact check them, right? I mean, if you watch a lot of the Christian television in America, you would think that Israel has cured everything. And, you got to be careful with that, right? I mean, I tend to believe things that China says more, but that I believe it, right? I believe that China would develop a cure for these things and all that, but I just want to be careful with that. But there you go. That sounds interesting. We all know big pharma in the United States is a complete rip-off industry that is just completely ripping off the American people. Populism is a threat to democracy. I hear liberals and neoconservatives say that. They want to go back to normal politics. I mean, it makes me mad that anyone can say that. What is populism? Oh, Peter says it's experimental. It's in the trial phase. Okay, very good. And shout out, I'm glad you're here, Peter, and shout out to you. But let me just say this, right? Like, how is populism a threat to democracy? What is populism? Populism is mass movement of the people. So how in the world could that be a threat to democracy? Right? In fact, the word democracy actually kind of refers to populism. I've told this many times, but in ancient Greece, they had two words for every system of government. They had one system of government that was the rule of a king, of a king. And if the king was a good king, they called him a monarch. But if the king was a bad king, they called him a tyrant. And they had the rule of an elite. And if the elite was good, they called them an oligarchy. And if the elite was bad and corrupt, they called them a plutocracy. And an elected government, if it was good, they called it a republic. And if it was bad, they called it democracy. And in ancient Greece, the word democracy was actually associated with vulgar mob rule, which is kind of, I think, what these people, these conservatives who say populism is a threat to democracy, that's what they're trying to characterize populism as. They're trying to, characterize populism as vulgar mob rule, demagogy, etc. And the second part of the question about why don't we just return to normal politics? Well, fix the economy, right? Yeah, if the U.S. economy started booming again, and we had 1990s level wealth in the United States and 1990s level stability, yeah, politics would go back to normal. But until the economy goes back to normal, that ain't going to happen. Now, there's another factor also. Not only is there the economic hardship, there's also the factor of information. Americans have more access to information than they've ever had before. And they're trying, that's changing. The internet is way more rigged than it used to be. And I'm seeing that, right? They're trying to scale that backwards. They're trying to put the genie back in the bottle. They're not going to be successful though, right? Because people have already learned to hear different views. But as far as, if you want politics to become less radicalized, fix the economy, make the living standards what they were, make the job security and stuff. And that would happen relatively quickly. Now, there would be more people that are somewhat radical simply because of access to information. So you can't completely go back to how it used to be. But, you could come pretty close if you fix the economy. I will say this, and this is important to be aware of. You have no idea how bad American politics used to be. I like American politics now. I mean, it's confusing, it's weird. And the woke people are not genuine socialists. And there's a lot of really dumb shit said by right wingers, but people are way more engaged politically than they used to be. It was bad. Peter Coffin, who's watching this, is my age. And he knows what I'm talking about. It was bad at one point. It was very, very bad in the 90s and in the early 2000s. People were brain dead politically. People had no idea about anything. I would say to people, the USA once supported Osama bin Laden. They'd be like, that's not true. America would never support anyone who did anything bad. You must be making that up. That can't be true. You have no idea, right? People used to have no idea that these wars were waged based on lies. People had no idea that the U.S. government had engaged in criminal wars, that the U.S. government was run by a group of rich people who didn't care about us. I think about when I was in high school, when I was in college. You have no idea. You have no idea how bad American politics used to be. People used to not have any suspicion, especially white Americans, white middle-class Americans. They lived in this fantasy land where, like the flag is good and everyone goes to church on Sunday and Santa Claus comes down the chimney. And it was infuriating. So honestly, I don't want politics to go back as weird as things are right now. Yeah, it was bad. You're not brain dead. You're not brain dead, Peter. You know stuff. Exactly. And Dad says the same thing. And your dad's right. People didn't know anything and they just went along with stuff. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable how bad it used to be. So I don't want the old politics back at all. I can't disagree with it. Was really sad news. Yes, it was. People were really, really brain dead, and people are much more engaged than they used to be. And that is a good thing, right? I often complain about things getting worse, but that's one thing I will say getting better. Oh, it's pretty late for you. Well, get some sleep, Peter. It's a late night, right? I just put on Cold Missouri Water, which is kind of sad, quiet song. There we go. Yeah, Peter is great. But anyway, all right. Next super chat question. Scrolling up because StreamYard is messing up and is not letting me put on super chats the way it used to. I don't know why. Scrolling up. All righty. I did the populism one. Thank you, Chaz Beretta. Right. And now I'm scrolling down to get to the next. And the next one is a super sticker from Jorge. Thank you, Jorge, for your super sticker. And now I'm scrolling down from Jorge's super sticker. Come on. All right. Okay. Now it's letting me scrolling down to the next super chat. How serious and expansive is Russian-African relations in terms of geopolitical potential reality? Nuclear energy even possible? Neo-colonialist military protection? ECOWAS to BRICS alteration? I think Russia has a huge future in trading with Africa because Africa is the future, right? And there's actually a chapter in the Green Book by Gaddafi, little known fact, called Black People Will Prevail in the World, where he argues that that Black people are the future of the human race, right? That it was white people, and now it's becoming Asian people, and after that, Black people. Black people are the coming explosion, and that Africa has so many natural resources. Africa has so many people, and people forget that human labor is the source of all wealth, right? People don't seem to understand Africa has people. Africa's population is rising. Africa has natural resources, and Africa is every day going more and more over to the new economy. Now, in terms of Russia-African relations, Russia, they have got wheat and grain for Africa. They supply African countries with fertilizer. And I was in Russia, and I have been at these conferences where Russia makes clear that it will help African countries develop their mining corporations. Russia has state-run mining companies that are very happy to partner up with African countries to develop their mining. You're talking about nuclear power. Russia is very good at nuclear power. I'm sure the United States will flip out if Russia ever starts helping peaceful nuclear energy come to African countries. They'll lose their minds and they'll say, oh, they're giving them nukes, which they're not doing, but they'll say that. I think, yes, Russia would happily do so. Russia and Africa have a very vibrant future. And every time I go to Russia, I see that. When I was at the World Youth Festival, so many African countries had big delegations there. When I was protesting, when we had protests to support Russia, when the Ukraine special military operation got going, in New York City's Union Square, we would get thumbs up from various people, and they would be Africans, not African Americans, African Africans. There's a lot of wealthy Africans who live in New York City, and those wealthy Africans love them some Russia. And it's happening, right? I'm just telling you, yes, Africa and Russia, and that goes back to the Soviet Union. That the Soviet Union worked really, really hard to support anti-colonial movements on the African continent. Now, is my book about that? Do I have my book about that? Or is that's over on my other shelf? My Africa books are over there. But, Russia worked really hard to support anti-colonial movements. And people don't even forget, people forget this. For example, if you go to Southern Africa today, what is the ruling party of South Africa? It's the African National Congress, which the Communist Party is the leading member of. The African National Congress was declared a terrorist organization by the American government because it was communist and because it was waging an armed struggle against apartheid. Where else in Southern Africa? Mozambique. What is the ruling party of Mozambique? The ruling party of Mozambique. What's it called again? Was it Fremlo? Ruling party of Mozambique. I'm Googling it because I actually forgot. What is the ruling party of Mozambique? Yeah, Frelimo, right? Which stands for the Liberation Front of Mozambique, which is a formerly communist party of Mozambique. What is the ruling party of Namibia? The Southwest African People's Organization, SWAPO, a communist organization. What's the ruling party of Zimbabwe? It is the ZANU, the Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front. What is the ruling party of Angola? It is the MPLA, the National Liberation Movement of Angola, the Marxist-Leninist Communist Party that Cuba sent its troops to support. I mean, all over Southern Africa, when these countries got their independence, they were led by communists who fought for that independence. So, the footprint of the Soviet Union in Africa, and yes, in the 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, many of these parties renounced Marxism and became social democrats, but a lot of them had still a communist faction within them. I mean, in Angola, right, the Angolan government may have denounced Marxism, Leninism, and become social democrats, but Isabel dos Santos is a communist. Right? She is a communist, and her father loves Cuba, and Cuba and Angola still have a very close relationship. Isabel dos Santos is a great anti-imperialist, thinker and leader, and has raised a lot of people in Angola out of poverty. And of course, now the U.S. government is trying to destroy her, but then the current president of Angola is very free market and neoliberal. But the dos Santos family, they are revolutionaries and anti-imperialists. Zimbabwe, land reform. I mean, and yeah, even in Namibia and Mozambique, in those countries, yes, these countries did renounce communism, but the ruling parties are still parties that came out of communism. And there's big pro-Russian, pro-Chinese factions in all of those parties. Right. So yeah, I mean, that's just that. I mean, that's just, these things are true. Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe government is basically a Marxist-Leninist government. I mean, they have been very slow to change property relations because of the treaty that they signed, the Lancaster House Agreement, but they redistributed the farmland, they've nationalized mining, and China is there investing. And, so yeah, I mean, socialism and ties to the Soviet Union and all of that are all over Africa. And that, the imperialists don't seem to mind until they start developing, and then they have an issue, right? They loved Mugabe at first because he didn't touch property relations. And in fact, I can show you old newsreels, news videos where they uphold Mugabe as the good anti-colonial fighter compared to that evil Nelson Mandela, right? Mugabe was the good one. And now they declared Mugabe to be a brutal dictator, right? Mugabe was the bad one all of a sudden. Right, because he started redistributing the farmland and he nationalized mining and such. And Mugabe is out of power. I think he died. But the ZANU PF, the revolutionary party that waged the Rhodesian Bush War against the apartheid government of Rhodesia and established the government of Zimbabwe, and then redistributed the farmland, and then is cooperating with China and all that. I mean, good things have happened, and that there are a lot of forces in Africa that are very strong, and their roots go back to the Soviet Union and the Soviet Union's support for anti-colonial liberation movements, because it's all about opposing imperialism. That's what it's all about. There is a system in the world today called imperialism, and that system is the enemy of all humanity. And it's the enemy of American working families. And that is what it's about. It's not about just saying, I am a socialist. It's not about worker cooperatives. It's about opposing imperialism. That is what it's about. There is a dying system called imperialism, which is capitalism in its monopolistic stage, and that is destroying humanity. And the bulk of the human race is breaking out of that system more and more every day. And the African people need to develop. They need to rise out of poverty, and Russia wants to help them do it. So that is my answer to your question. I think Russia-Africa relations are the future. David Harvey never talks about imperialism. Well, I'll just be honest with you. I find very little of David Harvey's work to be useful. I appreciate some of his writing about neoliberalism and the history of neoliberalism. That I find to be interesting. He talks about the Montpellier Society, and he talks about some of the neoliberal economics and where it came from. But I find very little of his work to be interesting. He reads Marx from like a literary perspective, and he's very opposed to all the currently existing socialist governments, especially China. So I don't really, David Harvey, he's an academic voice. He teaches in New York City. He's a British background, and he's an academic voice. And I don't really find his work to be that inspiring or interesting. So that's all I can say about it. I'm not shocked that he doesn't talk about imperialism, because he's about Marx, right? He's not a Marxist-Leninist. He's just a Marxist, right? So there you go. Let me put on, hold on. I just got to do something here. I got to start a video downloading. Excuse me, spring allergies. Hold on. Right? Hold on. I just want to start something here because there was a super chat about something, and I think we might be able to put some of it on. Oh, no, it still doesn't want me to download it. That is just downright bizarre. But John super chatted about Chairman O'Malley and his response to the Trump verdict, and I'm going to try to download it so I can show it on tonight's stream, because I tried to show it the other night and it wouldn't let me. Let's see if I can download it tonight, right? Let's see if it gives me a file to download tonight. All right. Looks like it's going to give me a file to download. Yep. Okay. I've got a file downloading. Okay. Thank you. When we get to that, John, we'll start putting that on, because, it's important stuff. Divisions in the ruling class. And Chairman O'Malley is on trial right now. I mean, he's facing trial in, in September, and we support the Uhuru movement against the charges against them. So there we go. All right. Next super chat question. Next question. Scrolling up. David Harvey doesn't talk about imperialism. No shocker. And that's the next one is John asking about Chairman O'Malley. So let's put Chairman O'Malley on, right? This is Chairman O'Malley Yeshitela talking about the Trump verdict. Where is it?
John Trump guilty on 34 charges in Manhattan. It is an extraordinary moment that we're looking at. And the outcome of this verdict is hard to predict. We've known for a while the depth of the crisis. We've talked about this for a long time. In fact, the first election, 2016, of Donald Trump was evidence of this crisis. But even the election of Barack Hussein Obama that preceded that was evidence of the crisis. The need for the colonial powers to represent themselves with Biden, with Obama, and to disguise their presence as the colonizers by selecting one of the colonized to represent this state that's oppressing and killing people all around the world. In this instance, we have Donald John Trump, and it's a statement about the crisis in this country. Even as I said, the election of Trump was representative of a crisis, because what Trump did, as we know, is that he ran for office in a fashion that criticized the entire system. Trump ran for office declaring opposition not just to the Democratic Party.
Thank you. Why is Chairman O'Malley the only socialist who seems to realize this? Right? It is beyond me. Right? I mean, all the other communists and socialists just never noticed that Donald Trump was appealing to people's anger at the system. Thank you, Chairman O'Malley. Very good point.
But opposition to the wars that the United States government was engaged in various places around the world, calling out this whole issue of nation building or something to that effect, that this government has historically been involved in overturning governments that it doesn't like, and then characterizing what it's doing as some kind of nation building process in other countries. And Trump came out opposed to that. Trump came out opposed to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That's the entity that is being utilized in a poorly concealed, to provide a poorly concealed war that's been made, even as we have this discussion right now, by the United States against Russia, using Ukraine also as a part of the vehicle to do that. Trump had initially come out being opposed to NATO, saying that the Europeans should be able to pay for their own defense, as they characterized it. Trump was somebody who opposed the status quo and the Atlanticist project that had been the governing body internationally, more or less, although loosely designed, but under the leadership of the United States, that was responsible for establishing the basic policies and directions for the colonizers throughout the world. And he came out against that. So he was treated initially by the bourgeoisie, by the colonizers, as a joke. And in fact, they gave him all kinds of free publicity because they didn't take him seriously. But what he had done was tap into deep sentiments of people in this country who are disgusted by the way things are going, and especially white people, 57% of whom would vote for Trump in 2016 and the following election. He did what most of the white leftists, so-called communists and others didn't dare to do. He criticized the entire setup, and the people wanted somebody.
Great. He's totally right. I mean, this is the first like honesty about this that I'm getting from any like Marxist or communist. All of them have this denial that Donald Trump, was doing anything that was at odds with the system. I mean, it's like they all have this, oh, Trump is, racist. And here is a black socialist leader of an African internationalist group who's sitting here and saying what is true about Donald Trump. I mean, this is why they're trying to throw him in jail, right? Because there's this script that socialists have. Donald Trump is a racist. We must support the Democrats, or we don't like the Democrats, but the Republicans are the main danger. He's not talking that way. This is why they want to put him in prison.
Who would expose the system, who would call it out, etc. And even though Trump did it in a fashion that was to satisfy the white nationalist sentiments of the white population in this country, it was something that definitely and without question called out the legitimacy of the system. He even criticized Hillary Clinton the one who used NATO in part to attack Libya and to murder Gaddafi, who was presiding over the most successful entity in Africa, so-called country in Africa, of providing free education, free housing, and talking about uniting Africa as should be. It was Hillary Clinton who presided over that, and she was the heir apparent that the Democratic Party was running. She was supposed to win that election, and Trump showed up and he won that election, and he did it in the process of criticizing Clinton, characterizing her as somebody who's paid and bought for. And he was saying that about other politicians. And he said, I know that's the case because I paid for and bought them myself. So this was something that was criticizing the system. And this was something that was unusual. You didn't hear any of the politicians who were running for office. In fact, most of the presidential candidates had lobbyists as their as their campaign officers and leaders, et cetera, because they represent particular corporations. And that's true with elections in this country, which are nothing but nonviolent contests between different sectors, contending sectors of the white ruling class, of the colonizers, for control of the state. And by the state, I'm not talking about New Jersey or Missouri. By the state, I'm talking about what you've heard some of the people who call themselves writers and MAGA forces talk about when they say the deep state. The state is that kind of force, that bureaucracy that presides over the things like the prison systems and the courts system and the military and the FBI and the CIA. And whoever controls that entity is in a profound profit-making position from the corporations. And so generally speaking, that's what you're looking at when you look at an election. But this time, and the election is supposed to resolve this question of which of the contending sectors of the ruling class is going to control the state. Who's going to control the courts? Who's going to control the militaries? Who's going to control the FBI, CIA, and be able to send them on murderous missions against all the people around the world? Who's going to be in charge of this process of NATO, which is run by the United States, et cetera? This is the question that the elections are designed to resolve. But when Trump came in, this did not resolve that question because the usual suspects lost. And we're talking about the Clinton, and we're talking about the other character who was running against for this office. And so this was not resolved through the election. And that's why you saw when Trump first came in, he started putting generals and other people in his cabinet to try to get a handle on the military. And that's why you saw many of the people who were came into his administration, people who were his campaign managers, also were attacked in prisons and in some instances charged with crimes. And of course, the crimes revolved around what? Russia. And they said that these were people who were working for Russia, and they actually, the Democratic Party or a sector of the bourgeoisie that's moved from the moment of his election to discredit and make it difficult for Donald Trump to rule, was saying that he was there because of the Russians, that Hillary Clinton didn't lose the election. It's the Russians who won the election. It was Russian contrivance that made this. And part of the reason for that, too, is because the United States is involved in this big contest with Russia. This is part of the crisis. It's facing a contest with Russia, with China, where the United States has, for the longest period, been able to dominate most of the world, especially since the 1940s, with the emergence of the Atlantic Group, with the emergence of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization that came out of that process, with the emergence of the United Nations that came out of that process, with the emergence of the World Trade Organizations and things like that, that establish all the rules, economic and political rules that govern the world. This is what came out of that process in that period. And then they lost this election, and Trump won this election. And this was a crisis that they have been fighting to overcome since that time. And so now Trump, you had a situation where Trump people he brought into his administration were accused of working for Russia. A general was the case of somebody who was his campaign manager, accused of working for Russia. And then Trump made some statement in one of his postings about how calling on Russia to send the information that Hillary Clinton was locked on Hillary Clinton's computer about stuff that she had done. And this, they said, is evidence that Trump was really working for the Russians. And so a casual statement like that, which was something that they used and they pumped up, etc. So the whole thing was Russia. And this is a means that they're trying to use, and we're trying to use to discredit the Trump presidency, to make it impossible, if possible, for him to be able to govern. And they did destabilize him, and they did certain kinds of things. And I had never seen anything like this before. Every day of Trump's presidency, he was attacked every day. There was not a day that you didn't see this in the media or hear this in the media, etc. So this is part of what happened. This is a contest between sectors of the ruling class. And that contest was for a nonviolent contest. It was supposed to be for control of the state. But this is not the first time we've seen something like this. And I want to remind everybody of this. Because if you remember, you have a situation now where Biden is responsible for butchering and murdering all kinds of people, heroic people in Palestine, fighting against the same colonialism that we are fighting against as Africans and other oppressed peoples around the world, as the indigenous people here. The Palestinians are heroically going up against all the war machinery that the United States is providing, given to this white nationalist Israeli settler state, this extension of U.S. power in the Middle East, and murdering all kinds of people. And at the same time, as related to that, you see the Biden administration catching hell. Part of the reason for that, you see students and campuses rising up. You see a greater fracturing of the social fabric inside this country. And this is extremely problematic. And even if, as we see Biden using the power of the state to participate in this election in an unveiled kind of way that everybody can see that clearly, and this is something that goes against the grain, against the whole historical narrative they've created about the wonderful democracy in the United States, where the military and these forces do not participate, where the state does not participate in the elections, that the people make their choices and that's it. And the state sort of stands aside as this neutral arbiter of the process, but it doesn't get involved in saying who's going to become the president. That's the line that they put forth in the past. Of course, we know it's not true. If that were true, they wouldn't have been bombing our churches and things like that when we were trying to get people registered and voting, et cetera. And I wouldn't be facing 15-year prison sentence today because we ran for office. But that was the line. And so, but that was in the 60s. We saw Vietnam, the heroic people in Vietnam fighting against what? Colonialism. And that's the thing that the whole system rests upon, the foundation of colonized people, of oppressed people, colonialism. And the colonizer can be right wing, can be left wing, can be fascist, can be liberal, but colonialism is the thing that we are looking at. And that's what we saw in the 1960s, the struggles of the oppressed and colonized people. Those colonized people, they were in Vietnam. We saw this just right following the Cuban Revolution. We saw in South Africa, people were rising up. All over the Americas, people were rising up. Che Guevara was calling for 2-3 mini Vietnams. People everywhere were fighting against colonialism. And this caused the crisis in this country, and Black Panthers and Black Power and JOMO and these forces were fighting against colonialism right here. In fact, they had to bring back to the United States airborne troops to Detroit from Vietnam. They had to bring them into New Jersey from Vietnam because the colonizers were rising up all over the world. They were rising up in Vietnam. They were rising up in this country. And so this is not new what we're seeing. The crisis was such that the U.S. government killed the president. You remember John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and it was revolving around these same contradictions we're looking at now, the colonialism and the question of African people. This is why some Africans mistakenly believe that Kennedy was our friend, because they assumed that they killed him because of his support for Black people. No, Kennedy had a particular different position as a colonizer on Vietnam and how the Vietnamese war should be fought. Not that it shouldn't be fought, not that the people in Vietnam should be free. He's the one who designed a new form of warfare that was similar to a guerrilla war. He's the one who created the Green Berets. He designed the uniform of the Green Berets and what have you, special forces who would fight against colonized people. That's what he did. And he was in such a situation to try to stabilize things in this country that he did try to utilize, just as Biden has utilized the Black vote and other votes in order to, because up until recently, it was very difficult for a Democrat to win the presidency. So Kennedy was able to do that, but he had to do that by creating a new kind of coalition that engaged, that brought Black people into it. That was one of the reasons the civil rights movement and things like that was necessary for him. And so we saw this happen then. We saw assassinations. We saw the murder of Malcolm X. We saw the murder of Fred Hampton. We saw a mass imprisonment of our forces. We saw the assassination of the co-founder of the African People's Socialist Party came out of that same process, even as they were fighting against the people in Vietnam. So this is not new, this crisis that we're looking at, and we should remember that. Don't get caught up by thinking that this is a new crisis. It's the same crisis born from a colonial mode of production. And every time the colonizers move, it shakes the very system itself, because the foundation of the whole capitalist system that people like to talk about is colonialism. And so we're not just talking about a lot of colonialism. We're talking about colonialism as a mode of production. It is the foundation of the whole system. That's the thing that unites us with the Vietnamese. That's the thing that unites us with the Palestinians. That's the thing that unites us with colonized people all around the world. And as quiet as it's kept, that's the thing that creates the basis of the political and social fabrics that you see in the United States itself. So white people are involved in this too. White people are part of the colonial mode of production. And that's why we don't talk this racism talk. You ain't asking white people not to be white or to be against being white. What we're asking is for white people to be for justice, against colonialism, and to be opposed to the murder that they see like that's happening in Palestine. And you see many white people are able to be opposed to that because they're not asking them to be not white. They're asking them to be opposed to colonialism. They're not saying fight against racism. They're saying fight against colonialism. Disrupt the college campuses. Do whatever is necessary. Be on the side of the future. And the future is the side of liberation for colonized peoples around the world. And that's the future that's happening right now. And that's the future that's responsible for this crisis that we see that's reflecting itself in this election process. And they're not calling it an election process. They're calling it a terminal trial. But that's exactly what it is, because everything they see point to Biden losing this election. Biden is not just some single-minded, bumbling person that's out there. Though he's that's not all he is. He is representative of a social force. He is representative of a particular sector of the ruling class. And so that sector of the ruling class is in a bad situation now with what they see happening. All the people, young African people, are turning against Biden. Young people in general are turning against Biden. Palestinians in this country, Arabs, turning against Biden. College students against Biden. And all the evidence they see shows that this coalition that the Democratic Party had created, not promising Black people anything except we ain't going to beat Trump. Not promising African people anything except we're not going to be the Republicans. Vote for us because you're afraid of the other person, not because Biden has never supported reparations. Biden has never supported civil rights. He was opposed to the civil rights bill when it was put forth. He was opposed to even busing that many of the people who are looking at me now were for, because he said he didn't want his children to go to school in the jungle. This is Biden who we're talking, not Trump. This is Biden who we're talking about. They're left-wing colonizers and they're right-wing colonizers, and they're insipid colonizers who neither left or right. They're just there. And I'm not saying that's Biden, but it could be. So I think that's really important for us to understand when we see what's happened. This is a critical moment. There's no telling what's going to be the outcome of this verdict that just passed today. What we do know for sure is that the American public, and when I say American, I'm talking about white people, even though there are Negroes who consider themselves Americans, et cetera, some people are smart enough. Even I heard Biden even once make the statement about black people and Americans talking to people about people in this country. And that's the smartest thing he ever said accidentally. So I think it's really important for us to see the depth of this crisis, to understand the depth of this crisis. There's no telling where this thing is going to go. We don't even know where it's going to go before nightfall, just in terms of people extremely upset and how the society is split. The American society is split. And how, if you remember, even after January 6th, how the American people almost overthrew the damn government. That was the Americans. Those were not Russians. Those were Americans who were looking like Spider-Man, climbing the walls of the Capitol. Those were Americans because of the depth of the split, the crisis inside this country that they cannot contain. And so what they do instead is that they use one sector as trying to get the Africans and others to come with it in its fight against its opponent. And the other sector is doing the same thing. You got Trump going to the Bronx, talking about speaking to black people. Trump saying all these black people support him. And there may be people who support him, but they support Biden. Why the hell not? If you got to support a colonizer, pick your choice. You understand? And so you've got Biden. And this is really disingenuous about Biden because, Biden didn't support reparations, never has supported reparations. Biden pretends that we're all Americans, et cetera, on the one hand. Biden is the one who had not too long ago a so-called Africa-U.S. summit where he summoned all the heads of state, as they characterize themselves in Africa, to come meet with him, where he promised he was going to give them some pittance. And then he talked about how the problem in America, we know there have been some problems, et cetera, and that talked about the original sin. The original sin he talked about of enslavement. Why would he tell Africans that who is coming from the continent? Because Biden is a Pan-Africanist. He doesn't want you to be an African internationalist, but he'll be a Pan-Africanist. He recognizes that you love Africa. He recognized that this relationship, this history between us and Africa. And that's why he just had the president of Kenya, Ruto, who was just now with the so-called Kenyan U.S. summit. He's going to have a summit with a leader from Kenya. And why was he having a summit with a leader from
All right. Well, hey, that was great. And if you want to watch the rest of it, I dropped the link in the chat on the Rumble and on YouTube. Yeah, and that was great. And thank you for suggesting that, John. A lot of brilliant analysis there. Making clear that imperialism is in a crisis, making clear that Trump represented a layer of the ruling class that was trying to mobilize anti-system sentiments. I thought that was great. And, we have to do everything we can. And we are talking about an outreach campaign. I mean, we're not just talking about it. We are in the process of developing an outreach campaign, about educating people about the Uhuru case, and trying to expand and engage with people, because the future is not online, as they say. The future is in terms of outreach. We can't count on the internet anymore because the internet is more rigged than it's ever been, and they are trying to put that genie back in a bottle. I don't think they'll be able to do it, but they're going to try. They will certainly try. So listen, tonight's stream, I think it went well. It didn't go exactly as I planned, right? I came on here with a plan. I was going to read some stuff to you all, but that's for the best, right? We did it a lot of different ways tonight. And we're almost at 3 hours. I mean, it'll be almost a 3-hour stream. So I'm a little tired, but I'll be back tomorrow night. And, and Gabby just got here as I'm shutting down the stream. Hey, Gabby's out in Chicago. But I think it was a successful stream tonight, and I'll be back tomorrow night. If you're in LA, Los Angeles, shoot me an email. We're having an event in Los Angeles. It's going to be great. It's in Monterey Park. You can go to my Twitter. The poster is on my Twitter. And it's been a great stream. And we'll be back tomorrow. So, yeah, talk to you all soon. I'm going to put on the closing music. And we will be back soon. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and I guess we will wrap it up. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.